American Comics, Weaving the Future, starting with the Ultimate Sky. Chapter 1. State University of New York. In the library study room, there was no one around. Reed, who had finished his homework for the day, stretched out his body. Then he squinted his eyes and looked at the clear sky outside the window. I want to create a new future video. With me as the protagonist, I will integrate the plot line of Kamen Rider Kuuga, change the location of the story to near New York, and make it self-consistent. The presentation effect will continue to use the form of commentary plus live broadcast, and then it will be directly projected into the light screen. Ding! Insufficient legend. In front of Reed, a translucent blue and white virtual panel flashed. Tisk! Isn't there even this little bit of legend? Reed sighed, muttering to himself in frustration. Since traveling from Earth to the Marvel world more than a year ago, Reed, like many travelers, has obtained a gold finger as expected. Template System of All Heavens. This is the name of Reed's gold finger. As the name suggests, the system will provide powerful character templates from all heavens and worlds. Then Red plays according to the characteristics of the template, thus causing a sensation worldwide, collecting people's emotional fluctuations and turning them into legends, so that he can constantly unlock the template progress and obtain endless power. In addition, legends can also create everything in the world, whether it is the interstellar super weapon Death Star, or the Zanpakuto in Death God, or the three mythical gods that dominate the dual world. Only with enough legends can these magical things that do not exist in the Marvel world be created one by one. In terms of effect, it can be called Doraemon's four-dimensional pocket. But, although the system's ability is powerful enough, but Red was somewhat distressed in his heart. Because the first role-playing template given by the system is Godai Yusuke Kamen Rider Kuuga. And if you want to play this role well, you must run through his philosophy and fight against monsters to protect people's smiles. It sounds simple. But the problem is that the time he traveled through was before Tony Stark became Iron Man. Where did the monsters or aliens come from during this period to give him legends? Thinking of this, Red's joy gradually faded, and he slowly regained his composure, thinking about how to implement the next plan to better unlock the template progress. After a period of hard thinking, a plan that can break the situation emerged in his mind. Since there are no monsters in reality to brush for me, it is better to collect legends through videos. Anyway, the system does not say that I must play in the real world. As long as the final result makes the world believe that I am Kamen Rider Kuuga who fights monsters to protect people's smiles, I can still get legends. This is not easier than playing hard in reality. While thinking, Red couldn't help but recall some inventory and spoiler novels he had read in his previous life. Maybe he can also create a light curtain system like those novels. At the beginning, Tony Stark, Steve Rogers and other superheroes are used as the protagonists to create Marvel future videos that are full of reality and make people unconsciously believe. Then, he would add his own content to these future videos, so that he could play the role of Godai Yusuke in the fictional future videos, obtain the legendary degree and complete the template unlocking. The system gave a feasible answer to this. For the system, the role-playing in reality and the role-playing in the fictional videos are the same. What is important is not the process, but the final result. As long as he grasps the concept of Godai Yusuke and plays it, and makes the world believe it, the system can convert these emotional fluctuations into legendary degrees one by one. Coincidentally, his novice gift package has 10,000 legendary points given by the system. Based on these legendary points, Reed quickly developed a detailed plan flow chart. Later, in the past year or so, in addition to using the legendary points to arrange a college student identity for himself, hiding in the State University of New York and becoming friends with Gwen, Harry and others, he spent all the rest of his time on making light curtain videos. The content played was a video about the future direction of Marvel in the form of commentary and live broadcast, combined with Reed's memory, to gradually gain the trust of the world and make them believe that everything played on the light curtain is real. Definitely, these are just appetizers. Red never forgot that all he did was to complete his role as Godai Yusuke. After more than a year of preparation, now is the most appropriate time, and it is time for him to appear on the light curtain. While thinking, Red immediately added to the system, since it is impossible to complete the creation of Kamen Rider Kuuga in one go, then create it one episode at a time and then put it into the light curtain. This time, the system did not issue a rejection prompt, but started to work quickly. The next moment, the light curtain flashing with psychedelic colors appeared out of thin air above various cities, and then a voice sounded slowly. Time, space, reality. It is not just a linear process, but more like a prism reflecting thousands of changes. A subtle choice can bring infinite possibilities, and then create strange parallel worlds. This time, I will lead you into the epic journey of the new hero. Shield, Triskelion building. In the dark office, the sound of the air conditioner blowing is endless. Nick Fury is discussing Shield with Phil Coulson. Suddenly, they notice strange movements in the sky. They look out the window subconsciously. When he noticed the light curtain that appeared out of thin air and the clear sound, Nick Fury frowned instantly. On the side, Phil Coulson couldn't help but make a worried sound. A new future video is about to be played. I hope it won't be bad news this time. No wonder he is so worried. After all, the changes brought about by the light curtain in the past year or so are really too great. At first, Phil Coulson saw a doctor named Bruce Banner through the light curtain. He accidentally turned into a green giant due to a military experiment, and was hunted by General Ross. In the end, he fought a battle with the military forces on the desert pyramids. He thought it was a virtual image specially created by Hollywood to promote the new movie. As a result, within a few minutes, Nick Fury contacted him and told him that all this was true. In reality, there is indeed a doctor named Bruce Banner who is being persecuted by the military, and he was ordered to go to the Rocinha slum in Brazil to rescue this poor doctor. In this regard, Phil Coulson gladly accepted the task, but he also began to have a premonition that the light curtain was not simple. Later, when he went to Brazil to perform the mission, the light curtain played a series of future videos such as the birth of Iron Man, the return of Captain America, and the advent of Thor. As a result, not long after the broadcast, the New York Times, the Daily Bugle and other media successively broke the news that Obadiah Stane, a major shareholder of Stark Industries, was found to have sold high-tech weapons to terrorists and encroached on the interests of the company. Then Tony Stark himself also held a press conference and announced to the public that Stark Industries would close its weapons manufacturing department from now on, and the group would make a major decision to transform into a controllable energy industry in all aspects. Then, Captain America was dug out of the ice by the America official and returned to the world. At this point, except for Thor who has not been found yet, all the people and objects that appeared in the video have been confirmed one by one. So far, both Phil Coulson and some other ordinary citizens have begun to realize that the future videos played on the light screen may be real, rather than some spoof movies made with 3D special effects. But why the light screen plays these future clips, Phil Coulson and others do not know, and can only make various assumptions. And the light screen has never made any response. In this case, the world can only accept the existence of the light screen. After a long time, some people even think that this is not a bad thing. After all, the existence of the light screen has indeed prevented many disasters from happening, and it has also allowed the superhero representing justice to enter the stage of history several years in advance. However, just when everything was developing in a prosperous direction, the future video played by the light screen next showed a future that made everyone feel desperate and fearful. That future video tells the story of a cosmic overlord named Thanos, who sent his invincible fleet to invade the Blue Planet in order to seize the infinite gems and realize his ambition to balance the entire universe. In front of the huge Chitauri army, the superheroes led by Iron Man and Captain America had no room to fight back and could only passively face the enemy's wave after wave of attacks. The city where they fought was directly reduced to ruins, and the casualties of the citizens were extremely heavy. Recalling the desperate scene, Phil Coulson felt powerless. He really couldn't imagine how to deal with this cosmic overlord who would definitely invade the Blue Planet in the future with the current power of mankind. Don't worry, the screen will show the future video of the new hero this time, there won't be any bad news. Knowing what Phil Coulson was worried about, Nick Fury patted him on the shoulder and comforted him. Then he looked at the huge screen outside the window, and the only intact eye flashed with a hint of expectation. The epic journey of the new hero. I want to see who can be described by the English word epic. If it's appropriate, maybe it's not a bad idea to include him in the list of alliances. Since Nick Fury took the position of SHIELD director, he has been preparing a plan. That is to form an Avengers team to deal with threats from outer space. But unfortunately, there are too few superheroes who meet the requirements. At this stage, there are no other suitable candidates except Captain America, Black Widow, Hawkeye, Hulk and Iron Man. And this number of people is undoubtedly not enough to fight against the Chitauri army that will invade Blue Star a few years later. After all, the Light Curtain has played the desperate future. The few superheroes can't make an effective counterattack against the huge Chitauri army, and finally fall under the human wave tactics of the Universe Overlord. Faced with such a desperate future, perhaps, the only way to deal with it is to call back the guy who wanders in outer space every day. But Nick Fury is not very confident that she can deal with the Universe Overlord alone. At this time, the Light Curtain brought a new future video, which undoubtedly gave him more choices. If he can recruit a few more powerful superheroes through the Light Curtain, he will be more confident in dealing with the Universe Overlord. Thinking of this, the expectation in Nick Fury's eyes became more and more obvious. At the same time, the Light Curtain began to flash different colors, and then the new future video officially started playing. New York, Adirondack Mountains. There is a huge crack in this mountain composed of hundreds of unconnected peaks, in which is hidden a retro-looking ruins, which is brightly lit and filled with various modern archaeological equipment. A group of staff members in archaeological costumes were collecting samples and doing various record-keeping work in the ruins with tools in their hands. In the innermost part of the ruins, a huge sarcophagus engraved with mysterious runes was standing diagonally high up. The pulley device located above was connected to several thick iron chains, which firmly bound the four corners of the sarcophagus lid, and then slowly tightened to lift the heavy lid. When the coffin lid was lifted to a certain height, the pulley device stopped working, and then a group of staff members holding professional tools stepped forward and began to stabilize the coffin lid suspended in the air. The remaining personnel, led by Professor Jimmy, the head of the archaeological team, put on night vision goggles to observe the scene in the sarcophagus, and what caught their eyes was a male corpse wearing a stone belt and gray-white clothes. Although his body had been completely withered over the long years, his skin was close to his bones, and every inch of muscle seemed to have been ruthlessly taken away by the years, leaving only a skeleton-like outline. But everyone present could feel that the corpse still had a glimmer of vitality, as if it had just been buried. Such a strange scene was completely beyond the scope of the archaeological team's understanding. You should know that according to the analysis of the soil collected so far, this mysterious underground relic has existed for at least tens of thousands of years and has been buried deep underground until a major earthquake last year caused the Earth's crust to move and the Earth to crack, which allowed the relic to see the light of day again. And in such a long time, the corpse still remains as if it had just been buried. How incredible it is. I didn't expect this kind of thing to be unearthed in the Adirondack Mountains. Looking at the still shiny skin of the male corpse through the night vision goggles, Professor Jimmy was shocked by the strangeness of the corpse, but also felt a burst of joy. Because he knew very well that excavating such a corpse with research value would cause a sensation in the archaeological community, and would also bring him countless fame and fortune. Professor, this is completely different from the burial method of the Indians. It seems that we have unearthed relics from a more ancient period. At this time, after some observation, a staff member couldn't help but excitedly tell his discovery. But another staff member next to him seemed very uneasy. For some reason, he always felt a sense of fear when looking at the corpse in the sarcophagus. Professor, this coffin lid shouldn't say that anyone who touches it without permission will be cursed, right? Monty, we have already touched and opened this sarcophagus, and no curse has been triggered, so stop saying these foolish words. Professor Jimmy replied unhappily, then clapped his hands and ordered. Okay, don't stand here in a daze, and then split into two groups. One group will be responsible for photographing the mysterious runes in the ruins, and then organize them into data and send them back to the laboratory, so that Dr. Stacy can translate these runes as soon as possible. As for the other group, start sorting out the corpses and burial objects in the sarcophagus now, and try to classify the items tonight. Yes, Professor. As the conversation ended, everyone in the ruins began to work again. However, none of them noticed that when they got back to work, the fingers of the corpse in the sarcophagus moved a few times inadvertently. Well, I have guessed what the subsequent plot will be like. In the Cliff Villa, Tony stopped optimizing the steel battle suit and watched this episode of the future video with Pepper on the open-air balcony. When he saw the light screen playing this part, he subconsciously teased. He was often invited to participate in movie premieres and could fully imagine how tragic the end of this archaeological team would be. However, despite the teasing, Tony did not forget the purpose of watching the light screen this time. Therefore, he quickly turned to look at JARVIS, which was recording and analyzing the content of the light screen, and asked it if it had analyzed any information. JARVIS, what did you learn? Sir, based on the analysis of the equipment used by the archaeological team in the video, it is currently determined that the timeline of the future video played by the light screen this time is approximately between 2016 and 2017. If I remember correctly, the Chitauri invasion was in 2012. Pepper raised her eyebrows in surprise and said uncertainly, and the timeline of this future video is between 2016 and 2017, doesn't it indirectly mean that we won the final victory in that battle against the Chitauri army? If that's the case, then this will be the best news I've heard in a while. Tony drank the wine in the glass and muttered in an impatient tone, I hope the light screen is not playing a future clip from a parallel universe this time. The light screen is like this. It only needs to play these future clips from different parallel universes as usual, and Tony Stark has more things to consider. After all, long before this, the light screen has played several future clips that were confirmed to occur in parallel universes. In this case, Tony dare not immediately assert that the video played this time is in their universe. Tony, don't put too much pressure on yourself. Pepper knew how much pressure Tony had been under during this period, and hurriedly comforted him, it's still 3 years before the Chitauri invasion. During this period, we may be able to find other solutions. I hope so. Tony didn't want Pepper to continue to worry about his situation, so he replied with a relaxed attitude, and then stopped talking about this topic, but turned his eyes back to the light screen in the air. Kennedy International Airport. Last June, when I was traveling in Annapurna Mountain in Nepal, I was trapped in a small cave because of a mountain accident. I was really scared at that time because I had little water and food left, and I had no idea whether I could survive until the rescue arrived. In the empty parking lot, an Asian man in a brown coat squatted on the ground, looking at the little boy in front of him who was separated from his parents and kept crying, and danced and talked about some things in the past, trying to comfort the child in this way. But the child of the local guide who was trapped in the cave with me at that time stood up to encourage me, smiling and telling me that the hymn of mankind is the hymn of courage, and as a human being, we must not be defeated by difficulties in any way. Under his encouragement, we survived countless dark nights in the cave with the little food left, and successfully waited for the arrival of the rescue team. So, although you feel scared when you are separated from your parents, you can't lose your courage and cry on the spot, because your parents and the police uncles must be anxiously looking for you. Wow. Obviously, these words said by the Asian youth did not work. On the contrary, facing his comfort, the little boy cried even louder. Seeing this, the Asian youth couldn't help scratching his cheek, and then patted his head as if he remembered something, took out a few small balls from his backpack and performed the juggling he had learned in college. Suddenly, the little boy's attention was attracted by the performance in front of him, and even the original sobbing stopped unconsciously, and then slowly showed a smile. Yes, that's right. You should always keep a smile on your face. Looking at the little boy who was smiling again, the Asian youth gave him a thumbs up and handed him the ball. Hey, try it too. Yeah. The little boy nodded and happily took the ball and started playing with it. At this time, there were bursts of hurried shouts not far away. Looking in the direction of the sound, the Asian youth and the little boy soon saw a couple running towards them under the guidance of airport security. Zion. Look, I told you not to run around alone. Under that seemingly stern but caring voice, the couple hugged the little boy tightly in their arms, and the little boy also smiled happily. Later, the little boy's father noticed the Asian youth next to him and quickly stood up to thank him. Thank you for taking care of the child. It's okay, it's just a matter of convenience. The Asian youth smiled and waved his hand, then made a farewell gesture to the little boy, then stepped on a slightly worn-out white motorcycle and sped away in the direction of the setting sun. In reality, when the light screen played this level 1 segment, most people did not have any special reaction. At most they praised the Asian youth for doing a good thing. But there were also some people who knew this Asian youth and were surprised that he appeared on the light screen. For example, the teachers and students of the State University of New York. Although the Asian youth on the light screen looked much more mature, they still recognized him at a glance as the super student who won the first place in the school year not long ago. Read. And his class was suddenly in a sensation because of his appearance. When Jessica saw the figure of her classmates appear on the light screen, she hugged Gwen's arm excitedly and shouted to her, "Wow, Gwen, look, Red is on the light screen. You said, he is not the new superhero that the light screen is going to introduce this time, right?" According to Hollywood's shooting techniques, this shot can basically confirm that Red is the new hero to be introduced this time, but it involves the mysterious light screen, and it is estimated that we still have to wait for the subsequent future videos to be played before we can confirm it. Although she has a certain affection for Red, the super student who has been competing with her for grade ranking, and hopes that he can become a world-renowned superhero like Iron Man and Captain America in the future. But facing the inquiry of her friend, Gwen still made a rational analysis. But as soon as she finished speaking, the content played by the light screen made her subconsciously open her mouth and show a stunned expression. Late at night, silence. In the archaeology laboratory at the State University of New York, a blonde woman in a dark sweater was sitting in front of a computer, flipping through the information just sent back by the archaeological team. At this moment, the phone rang and the blonde woman answered the call. "Hello, hello. What? It's Jessica. I'm a bit busy now. Call me later." "Ah. You're not dating a man?" Faced with the repeated questions from her friend on the other end of the phone, the blonde stopped the work at hand and explained, "In order to decipher the ancient texts in the ruins of the Adirondack Mountains, I am looking for similar texts in the history of civilizations around the world. Also, don't think too much. There is no way there is a curse rune in the ruins. After all, it is a text in the ruins. It is probably a catalog-like rune-like, whose coffin is this, and what funerary objects are buried in it. So, the big headlines of the journalists, you should dig them out yourself. Goodbye." After chatting with her friend Jessica for several sentences, the blonde hung up the phone, then stood up and stretched. Following this action, the picture finally froze on the identity card hanging around the woman's waist. Head of the Archaeology Research Laboratory, Gwen Stacy. "Great, Gwen, you're on the light screen too." Jessica danced with excitement, and shouted to Gwen, who was surprised, "And my name is on the light screen too. It seems we're all going to be famous this time." While she was talking, the other people in the class turned their heads and looked over in tacit understanding. Well, it should be. Faced with these looks and Jessica's shouting, Gwen was somewhat at a loss, and even her reply was a bit perfunctory. After all, before this, who would have thought that she would appear on the light screen? It's impossible that she would become a member of the superhero, right? For some reason, thinking of this, Gwen felt a little excited. However, before she could start her reverie, the phone rang suddenly, and when she picked it up, she found that it was a call from her father, George Stacy. Gwen immediately had a bad premonition. Because she knew her father well, she had guessed the purpose of the call. But even if she guessed, Gwen couldn't just ignore the phone that kept ringing. Therefore, after hesitating for a long time, she finally pressed the call button. The next second, George Stacy's anxious voice instantly resounded throughout the classroom. "Baby, stay in the class now, I'll come to pick you up now, remember, don't get close to those. Dad, don't talk so loudly, I know everything." Although she knew that it was because her father cared about her that he was so anxious and loud. But noticing that the eyes of the classmates around her became teasing, Gwen still felt her face blush, and quickly turned down the volume and replied, then hung up the phone and pretended that nothing had happened and continued to look at the light screen. In the research room, Gwen stretched for a while, then walked to the bookcase not far away where the information was stored, and began to look for the information and documents she needed. But in this quiet night, a strange figure quietly appeared. He wore a white horror mask and climbed up silently along the winding vines on the wall of the university building. Finally, He stopped climbing when he approached the floor where the archaeology research room was located. Then, this mysterious figure quietly pushed open the curtains and jumped into the research room agilely like a light leopard. During the whole process, he did not make any sound, and walked step by step towards Gwen, who was concentrating on finding information, giving people the illusion that a bloody murder was about to happen at the scene. Seeing this scene. In reality, many kind-hearted people can't help but worry. They are afraid that this blonde beauty who seems to have walked out of a fairy tale will die at the hands of this mysterious climber. And George Stacy, who was driving a police car and rushing towards the State University of New York, instantly showed an angry expression. He swore that if anything happened to his precious daughter on the light screen, he would make the climber pay with blood. Under such worried and angry eyes, the light screen continued to play the subsequent videos. Seeing that the mysterious climber was about to touch Gwen, a crisp voice suddenly sounded. Although I really want to say it's been a long time, I still hope you can change this bad habit and don't come in through the window again. Red. Ah, has this been discovered? Red, wearing a horror mask, shook his head and argued, but this can't be blamed on me. The walls of the teaching building are obviously covered with vines, and no one has come to clean them up. Isn't this like inviting others to climb? Please, think about it carefully. How could the school issue such an invitation? We are the ones who will be scolded for doing this. Gwen sighed without looking back, and then continued to search for information while replying. Sorry, and look at this. Hearing this, Red scratched the back of his head embarrassedly, then took off the horror mask on his face and changed the subject. This is a local product I brought back from Indonesia specifically for you to ward off evil spirits. It is said that this is a mysterious mask specially made by the Korowai people in ancient times to fight against evil. There are more strange things. Turning her head and looking at the mask in Red's hand, Gwen smiled, then walked to her seat with the information in her hand, and asked, would you like coffee? No. Red shook his head. I'm leaving soon, and I'm going to take a trip to the ruins of the Adirondack Mountains that have been hot in the news recently. Red, you're still the same, you can't rest. Ding. As she spoke, Gwen slowly sat back in her seat. At this moment, a prompt sound of completed translation suddenly popped up on the computer screen, crisp and loud, instantly attracting Gwen's full attention, and she quickly moved her eyes from the file in her hand to the screen. However, when she saw the contents on the screen clearly, her long and thin eyebrows wrinkled involuntarily, and her eyes revealed confusion and puzzlement, as if she saw something beyond her expectations. Is this what it means? What's wrong? Hearing Gwen's doubtful voice, Red's curiosity was instantly ignited, and he quickly leaned in to look at the computer, and what came into his eyes was the English words, death, and warning, all over the screen. Death, warning. What is the translation of this rune, Gwen? This is a rune pattern excavated from the ruins of the Adirondack Mountains. I am currently helping Professor Jimmy of the archaeological team with the relevant translation work. According to common sense, these internal materials that have not yet been released to the public should not be disclosed to outsiders, but out of trust in Red, Gwen still said it without reservation. Hearing this, Reed showed a nervous expression. Then this screen full of death and warning, doesn't it mean that the things in the ruins are very dangerous? That can't be said. Maybe, the part of the text I just translated just corresponds to the curse text that the burying person wrote to the tomb robbers before his death. Gwen said so, but looking at the translated content on the computer, she still felt uneasy for a while. After a while, she talked to herself as if to convince herself. For the time being, ask the people in the archaeological team for advice, just as a topic. As she said, Gwen picked up the special telephone in the laboratory on the table and dialed the number of the archaeological team. At the same time, in the super ancient ruins in the Adirondack Mountains, the instrument used to explore data suddenly seemed to be shrouded by an indescribable dark energy, and it made a sharp and piercing noise crazily, like the roar of a ghost, which was particularly harsh in the silent ruins. Immediately afterwards, the lighting lamps originally hanging around also shattered under the impact of this energy. The originally bright space was instantly swallowed by darkness, and the entire ruins fell into endless darkness again, leaving only the panicked voices of the archaeological team members echoing in the ruins. Hello. Is it the police? This is the ruins excavation site in the Adirondack Mountains. Please come and save us quickly, save us. Monty, who had just been scolded by Professor Jimmy not long ago, was terrified at this moment. He held the phone tightly in his hand and trembled to dial the police station's emergency number, his voice full of despair. The staff member in charge of photography beside him was also frightened by the sudden horror scene and was weak, and the camera in his hand slipped directly to the ground. In front of them, a figure shrouded in darkness slowly approached, and then a hideous palm stretched out from the darkness and ruthlessly covered Monty's face, twisted by fear. Ah! The shrill screams echoed in the ruins, and the sound was full of despair and helplessness. The image on the screen also froze, focusing on the camera that fell to the ground. At this moment, the camera is still working normally. The lens faithfully recorded everything that was horrible. The dark figure, the terrified face, and the various items scattered on the ground were all captured one by one, becoming the eternal witness of this disaster. After watching this scene, most of the real audience began to express their opinions online. Wow, the last scene played by the light screen really scared me. I didn't expect that there was such a terrifying monster sleeping in the Adirondack Mountains. Oh, who cares what monster it is? Anyway, we don't have many years to live. It's better to think about how to spend the remaining time happily before the Chitauri army invades Blue Star. Hey, man, think positively. Maybe there will be a new superhero standing up to deal with the Chitauri army invading Blue Star, and then get rid of that purple potato spirit together. Thanos is not only powerful in himself, but also has an invincible fleet that dominates the entire galaxy. Even the Xandar star specially introduced in that issue of the light screen was easily washed away by him. What kind of superhero can have such strength? So stop telling these jokes. Don't be so pessimistic. Who can say for sure what will happen in the future? Maybe there will really be a superhero who can create a miracle and get rid of it for us, whereas Thanos. What the above person said is right, and don't forget that the title of this light curtain is The Epic Journey of the New Hero. The fact that the light curtain can be described as epic means that the superhero appearing this time is definitely of great weight, and perhaps he is our hope. By the way, where is this read from? How does he know the Doctor of Archaeology at the State University of New York? Someone has just revealed that he is a super student who won the first place in the academic year at the State University of New York not long ago, and is a classmate of the blonde doctor. Amid the quarrels on the internet, the picture on the light curtain continued to change. Hello. Hello. Ah, what should I do? The call was delayed and no one answered. Gwen's thin eyebrows were tightly knitted together, and she felt uneasy. I'll go take a look. Call me if you have anything. At this time, Red's voice suddenly sounded. When Gwen looked up, he had disappeared in the direction of the door, and did not give his old classmates a chance to stop him. The picture turned. At this moment, Red was driving a white motorcycle, speeding on the Central Expressway like a flash of lightning, heading towards the Adirondack Mountains. However, the sky changed at an inopportune moment. Heavy rain and howling winds forced Red to slow down the car, and then stop the car at a flashing red intersection. While waiting for the green light, he took out a raincoat from the trunk and put it on himself. At this moment, his intuition seemed to have a premonition of something, and he subconsciously turned his head to the left. I saw a pale, ghostly lightning column suddenly rising from the direction of the Adirondack Mountains and blasting into the sky. Then, countless slender arcs of lightning spread out like a group of silver snakes, quickly covering the entire sky of New York. The scene was spectacular and terrifying, as if the end of the world had come. In this shocking scene, a figure shrouded in darkness slowly walked out of the super ancient ruins. He has a huge body far beyond that of an ordinary person, like a moving mountain, with long hair scattered and messy, entangled with countless pale lightnings, and with every step he takes, there are arcs of lightning spreading around, destroying everything around him like a rotten wood. It seems that he is the monster sealed in the ruins of the Adirondack Mountains. Beside the pool of the Washington Monument, Steve, who was jogging in the morning, stopped and looked at the dark figure on the light screen with a solemn look. Although he couldn't see the face of this monster clearly, with the experience accumulated from years of military combat, he still perceived an amazing murderous intent from this dark figure. This feeling is like being stared at by a top predator, as if it will open its bloody mouth and pounce on him in the next second. Imagining this picture, Steve's muscles all over his body instantly tensed up, and his eyes looking at the light screen became more vigilant. After an unknown amount of time, the mysterious figure stopped at a crack further down in the ancient ruins, then opened his hands, revealing the mysterious runes hidden in his palms. The next moment, the pale thunder in the sky gathered in his palms. Then, the mysterious figure raised his hands high and spoke a language that had never appeared in human history. Resurrection. As the ancient language fell, he slapped his hands heavily on the dark golden belt around his waist. At this moment, as if some ancient mechanism was touched, the pale thunder condensed in his palms changed instantly. From the original single lightning, it turned into two different colors of thunder, one red and one blue, flashing a strange and powerful light, and then injected into the crack under the control of the mysterious figure. Suddenly, there were bursts of wind-like roars from the crack, followed by hideous figures that were also shrouded in darkness, slowly crawling out from deep underground. These figures are of different shapes, some look like twisted monsters, and some look like mutated creatures, exuding a chilling aura. Such a terrifying picture. It seems to be foreshadowing that a disaster is about to begin. At this moment, the entire super ancient ruins seem to be shrouded in a strange and terrifying atmosphere, and those dark creatures crawling out of the cracks add a bit of mystery and danger to this land. Shield, Triskelion building. Nick Fury looked at the monsters covered by darkness crawling out of the cracks on the light screen, frowned, and gave orders in a serious tone. Phil Coulson, no matter whether the video played on the light screen this time is a future clip of our universe, we must take precautions before it happens. Next, I'll trouble you to go to the Adirondack Mountains. No wonder Nick Fury spoke in such a serious tone. After all, the power displayed by this mysterious figure is too terrifying. Not only does he have a terrifying murderous intent that seems to be able to kill everything, but he can also summon pale thunder out of thin air and cover the sky over the entire New York in just a few seconds. You know, the area of New York State is as large as 128,401 square kilometers. It can cover it all in such a short time. Needless to say, how strong this mysterious figure is, not to mention that he has the ability to revive other monsters. When he thought of this, the fear in Nick Fury's eyes became more and more obvious. At this moment, he was still able to maintain a relatively calm tone to give orders, which was enough to restrain his inner emotions. Well, I'll go now. Understanding Nick Fury's concerns, Phil Coulson didn't care to continue watching the future video played on the light screen at this time. He nodded and responded directly, then turned around and left the director's office. In the end, only Nick Fury was left in the office, watching the light screen. New York State. Excavation site of the ruins in the Adirondack Mountains. After last night's violent storms and raging thunder, the mountains welcomed the first golden sunlight in the morning. However, the excavation site at the moment was completely different from the hustle and bustle of yesterday. The silence revealed unspeakable changes. The tents that were originally neatly arranged around the ruins are now in ruins, with only broken canvas and broken brackets scattered on the scorched land, like a battlefield that has experienced war. The scene has turned into a barren land, the ground is cracked, and deep cracks are like scars, silently telling the horror of the natural disaster last night. In addition, a group of police officers are busy searching for clues, looking for traces of cobweb that the criminals may have left. But unfortunately, they didn't find any of them. Not only that, as the search deepened, the signs of damage to the excavation site made the police fall into deep confusion. As for lightning, the scope and power of this destruction are too great. Not only did it destroy all the flowers, plants and trees within a radius of thousands of meters, but even the ground and huge cracks around the ruins were blasted with countless cracks. Is this really what lightning can do? A man wearing a yellow-gray windbreaker and black sunglasses looked at everything around him, frowned, and then asked the prosecutor beside him. Do you think it's possible that something else exploded, causing the excavation site to become like this? Impossible. I've just confirmed with the head of the Meteorological Bureau that there are no recent records of earthquakes caused by explosions in this area. The prosecutor shook his head and responded truthfully. While they were talking, Red had already arrived at the excavation site and squatted under a charred tree, curiously watching the movements at the ruins. His sight was like a searchlight, Taking in the broken stone pillars in the ruins that once supported the super-ancient civilization, the cracks in the earth that were constantly smoking and exuding an uneasy atmosphere, and the police officers who were busy searching for clues. But at this moment, when Red's eyes inadvertently moved to the entrance of the ruins hidden in the huge crack, an indescribable feeling suddenly surged into his heart like a tide. He unconsciously stepped back several steps, and in a panic, he almost slipped down the slope. He quickly stabilized his body and held the ground tightly with both hands, barely maintaining his balance. What is this? After regaining his footing, Red's eyes turned to the entrance of the ruins again, and a curious expression quietly appeared on his face. Because he could clearly feel that there seemed to be a mysterious power in the ruins calling him, urging him to enter quickly. Although it was unclear what this mysterious power was. But driven by his inner curiosity and calling, Red finally walked down the slope steadily, then crossed the cordon and approached the entrance of the ruins step by step. But the more we investigate, the more mysteries we find. On the other side, at the entrance of the ruins, the prosecutor continued to chat with the man in sunglasses wearing a yellow-gray windbreaker. I have been engaged in mountain rescue for so long, and this is the first time I have encountered such a situation. Hearing this, the man in sunglasses frowned and was about to ask something. But at this moment, he keenly perceived the strange movement behind him, turned his head and saw a young man in his 20s sneaking past him. I'm late, sorry, I'll get to work right away. Reed realized that he was discovered, and hurriedly pretended to be a staff member, perfunctorily speaking, while speeding up his pace, trying to take the opportunity to enter the ruins. However, his attempt did not succeed. The man in sunglasses reacted quickly, stretched out his hand and grabbed Reed's sleeve, and then pulled him in front of him. Tell me the truth, what do you do, and why are you at the crime scene? While asking questions, the light curtain also very considerately posted the identity of the police officer. Johnny Stone, chief of the New York State Police Department. Oh my God, Susan, look, I'm on the screen. Looking at himself on the screen with a handsome appearance, Johnny jumped up from the sofa excitedly and shouted to his sister, it seems that this time, your brother is really going to be famous. Johnny, I have to warn you in advance. Susan rolled her eyes and replied unhappily, I don't care how you want to play, but you must not bring those girls home, understand? Oh, by the way, remember to come back before 12 o'clock, otherwise don't blame me for complaining to my parents. Oh, no. Hearing this, Johnny's excited expression collapsed immediately, then what fun is there? As he said, Johnny collapsed directly on the sofa behind him, looking like he had no desire to live. Seeing this, Susan couldn't help but smile, but looking at Johnny's serious expression on the screen, the smile on her face instantly disappeared, replaced by deep worry. Because, the Johnny Stone shown on the screen has a completely different personality from the brother she is familiar with, and this huge amount of contrast makes her feel unfamiliar. At the same time, she is also worrying about what kind of changes will happen in the future to make a lively and cheerful brother become so calm and serious. It's still not possible. Red sighed and turned his head to look at the sunglasses police officer who stopped him. No. Johnny Stone looked up and down at Red in front of him with a scrutinizing look, and asked in a bad tone, what do you mean by this? Nothing, just some words to myself. Red didn't dare to say in front of the police that he wanted to sneak into the ruins, so he immediately changed the subject and told the purpose of his trip. Actually, I was called here by Dr. Stacy from the State University of New York. She is an external translator of the archaeological team. When interpreting the ancient text in the ruins last night, she translated ominous text. For safety reasons, she asked me to come to the ruins site to inform everyone in the archaeological team to be careful. Ominous text. Yes, it's a warning of death. Although Reed looked very confident, Johnny Stone didn't completely believe what he said. Therefore, he quickly asked again, are you related to the archaeological team? No, I just happened to be free, so I came here to inform Dr. Stacy. Reed shook his head, then took out a business card from his pocket and handed it over. Here, this is my business card. After taking the business card, Johnny Stone looked down at the content on it. Suddenly, the corners of his mouth twitched a few times. The man pursuing his dreams, Reed. Exactly. Reed smiled and nodded, then gave the police in front of him a thumbs up. Faced with this thumbs up, Johnny Stone fell silent. After a while, he suppressed his desire to complain and continued to speak. John, take this guy to the police car and detain him first. Yes, sir. Police officer John, who was watching the show next to him, suppressed his smile and took the task, then pulled Red's arm forward. Come with me, Mr. Red, who is pursuing his dream. As he said, regardless of whether Red reacted or not, police officer John directly carried him towards the police car at the bottom of the mountain. Wait a minute, who is that? The ruins were so close. Red didn't want to be dragged away like this, so he pointed his finger at the sky next to the ruins and shouted, and then took advantage of the distraction of police officer John to break free from his restraints and ran towards the entrance of the ruins not far away. However, these little tricks he played obviously did not fool Johnny Stone. Seeing that Red wanted to force his way into the ruins, he blocked the entrance of the ruins and said in a deep voice, "Stop." But the ruins were right in front of him, and Red didn't care about these warnings, so he rushed over his arm and continued to rush forward. Seeing this, Johnny Stone was no longer polite, and immediately stretched out his hand to trip Red's feet, causing him to lose balance and fall to the side of the stairs. And there happened to be an archaeological instrument scattered on the ground, pointing at his head at the sharpest angle. If they really collided, I'm afraid Red's head would be broken on the spot. Fortunately, at this critical moment, Johnny Stone reacted in time and grabbed Red's collar, allowing him to stabilize his tilted body, and then exerted force again to pull him up directly. On the other side, Red, who had luckily saved his life, quickly wiped the cold sweat from his forehead, then looked at Officer Johnny, who saved his life, and thanked him with a bit of embarrassment and apology. "Thank you so much, Mr. Policeman. HMPH. Don't think it's useful to say this now. I'm going to arrest you for obstructing public service next." In response, Johnny Stone rebuked him mercilessly, then turned his head and looked at Officer John. "Take him back to the police station and interrogate him thoroughly." "Yes, Mr. Stone." Officer John knew that his superior was angry, so he didn't dare to neglect it. He quickly took out handcuffs to tie up Red's hands and pressed him down the mountain. "Don't. I'm just curious. I won't commit the crime of obstructing public service, right?" Faced with this scene, Red quickly begged for mercy. Just at this moment, a police officer walked out of the cave entrance of the ruins with a stone belt, and then walked past him. At this moment, the indescribable feeling of touch from before surged into Red's heart again, and in his mind, a lot of memories that did not belong to him emerged. In that strange memory, a man in gray and white clothes seemed to be wearing this stone belt, and then changed his form at the moment of turning around, turning into a warrior covered in red armor. Although these memories seemed very vague, causing Red to be unable to remember the full appearance of the Red Warrior, he still vaguely remembered the red compound eyes and the horns that flashed with golden luster. Just as I guessed, the stone belt is the key. In the military, in a private office. Looking at the figure of the Red Warrior appearing on the light screen, General Ross's eyes flashed with excitement. As a representative of the Hawk faction in the Army, General Ross has been committed to creating a super soldier corps like Captain America throughout his life. That's why he is so obsessed with Hulk and has been implementing the plan to capture Bruce Banner for several years. Even when the American official dug out Captain America from the ice. He also made a crazy suggestion, which is to use Steve Rogers' body for human experiments to see if a complete version of the super soldier serum can be extracted. But unfortunately, all his proposals and plans to hunt down Hulk were ruined by Nick Fury, the director of S.H.I.E.L.D., and he successfully persuaded the president and congressmen to jointly order the military to disband the Super Soldier Research and Development Department. In this series of targeted actions, General Ross's plan to create a super soldier army was delayed. And in this context, a magical belt that may create super soldiers appeared on the light screen, and he would definitely be tempted by it. If he could dig out the stone belt from the ruins of the Adirondack Mountains and study it thoroughly, so as to achieve mass production. Then he could fulfill his wish and create a Red Warrior army. By then, even if that Thanos invaded America with his Chidori army, he would have the confidence to stop it. Under such temptation, General Ross quickly picked up the phone on the table and called his most trusted and capable subordinate. Captain Bronsky, I need you to lead a commando company to the Adirondack Mountains and bring me the stone belt that appeared on the screen. No problem, General. After taking the task, Emil Bronsky immediately picked up the military-specific communicator and said in a light tone. Guys, it's time for us to go on the mission. New York, Brooklyn Police Headquarters. Red, who successfully escaped from the interrogation of Officer John, was sitting on the motorcycle at the moment, looking around boredly. At this time, Gwen's crisp voice came from not far away. Sorry, I'm late. It's okay, I just happened to get out of the police station. Turning around, seeing Gwen running towards him in a hurry, Red smiled and replied, then continued to ask. By the way, has the investigation I faxed to you at the convenience store come out? I did a preliminary translation and came up with several possible translations. Gwen took out the copy that Lin Luo faxed to her from her pocket, but which one it is, I can't confirm yet. Really? Let me take a look. Red hurriedly moved closer and looked at the copy in his hand very closely with Gwen. At this time, a familiar voice came from beside him. I didn't expect you to be still around here. It seems that John's interrogation took a long time this time. No, in fact, Officer John let me go soon. The reason I'm still here is just that I happened to meet a friend nearby. Looking up, he found that the visitor was the sunglasses police officer he met in the Adirondack Mountains in the morning. Red didn't hold a grudge, and explained with a smile, then pointed to Gwen beside him and introduced her. By the way, let me introduce you to Dr. Gwen Stacy, whom I mentioned earlier. Oh, are you Dr. Stacy? Hearing this, Johnny Stone quickly took off his sunglasses, looked at Gwen, who looked confused, and said in a business tone. I was planning to contact you in a few days, but I didn't expect to meet you here. I don't know if you are free now, Dr. Stacy. I just want to ask you something about the ruins in the Adirondack Mountains. Although she still didn't understand the current situation, she nodded when she heard that the police officer wanted to ask about the ruins. Then, under the leadership of Johnny Stone, Gwen and Red, who was joining in the fun, entered the meeting room of the police headquarters. This is a videotape that our police found at the ruins site in the Adirondack Mountains. In the conference room, Johnny Stone took out a previously backed-up videotape. It is also the only item left from this tragedy. Then, are all the other members of the archaeological team killed? Yes. Johnny Stone nodded with a heavy heart. According to the forensic examination, all the members of the archaeological team died on the spot. As partners, we have only known each other for a short time. Hearing this bad news, Gwen's face suddenly turned pale, and even her thin eyebrows were tightly wrinkled at this moment. By the way, what is recorded in that videotape? Reed took over the topic and asked about the videotape after noticing Gwen's sadness. But this time, it was Johnny Stone's turn to fall into silence. After a while, he spoke with hesitation. I don't know how to describe it, so please watch the videotape together. If you feel uncomfortable in the middle, we will stop playing the videotape immediately. Speaking, Johnny Stone turned off the lights in the conference room and played the content recorded on the videotape. Ah! As soon as the picture appeared on the screen, it was filled with shrill screams and fear. Then, the picture turned to the deepest part of the ruins, where a sarcophagus seemed to have suffered a violent impact and tilted down, causing the male corpse in gray and white clothes hidden in the coffin to fall out. Then a mysterious figure with scattered hair slowly stood up amid the panic of the crowd, and picked up the stone belt from the ground with anger, making a roar like a beast. Kuga. Accompanied by the undisguised anger, the mysterious figure in the raging hair slammed the stone belt in his hand to the ground, then turned around and walked towards the archaeological team who were also in the ruins with an indescribable rage. At the end of the picture, those once familiar faces became fragmented in an instant, and their lives disappeared one by one under the claws of the mysterious figure. Facing such a cruel picture on the screen, Gwen lowered her head directly, unable to bear to watch it anymore. But the grief in her eyes could never be concealed. Seeing all this, Reed gently patted her shoulder and gave silent comfort. During this period, the videotape had also been played, and then Johnny Stone turned on the lights in the conference room again and said, "At present, the true identity of the mysterious figure is still unknown. But that guy threw the belt-shaped ornament to the ground in anger at the end. This action made me a little concerned, so I want Dr. Stacy to help identify this belt to see if there are any clues from it. Definitely, you don't have to worry about the relevant procedures. I will find a way to solve this. As he said, Johnny Stone opened the suitcase containing the stone belt and placed it in front of Gwen and Reed. Isn't this the belt I saw in the ruins this morning? With just one look, Reed recognized that this was the belt that had given him an illusion in the ruins before. Yes, because it involves the case. This artifact unearthed in the Adirondack Mountains is currently being handled by our police. Johnny Stone nodded and explained. At this time, a police officer pushed open the door of the conference room with a panicked look, came to Johnny Stone's side and whispered. Mr. Stone, something happened. It appeared next to the 3rd Street building. Well, I know. Hearing the police officer's words, Johnny Stone frowned and immediately turned to Red and Gwen Stacy and said. I'll leave this artifact to you two for safekeeping. Thank you. Excuse me. After that, Johnny Stone followed the police officer out of the meeting room. As for Red, after watching Officer Johnny leave, he picked up the stone belt in the suitcase, pointed to the mysterious rune on it, and asked. Gwen, do you know what this rune means? Faced with Officer Johnny's departure and Red's question, Gwen also briefly recovered from her sadness, then pursed her lips, looked at the mysterious rune on the stone belt, and explained. This rune has several interpretations, but combined with the appearance of the belt and the content of the videotape, I am more inclined to its meaning, power. Power. Red subconsciously repeated the word. But he didn't notice that when his hand touched the mysterious rune on the stone belt, the belt inexplicably flashed a faint silver-white luster. As the video on the screen played to this level 1 segment, countless viewers outside were discussing it. It seems that this belt is the one that Red used to gain power and become the key to superhero. Wow, this is just like the plot of a Hollywood movie where someone is chosen by a super ancient power as the protagonist. It's so enviable, I wish I could be in it. Quote. Hey, man, if you really want to, you can actually go to the Adirondack Mountains. What if you were lucky enough to dig out this belt from the ruins? Don't even think about it. I live near the Adirondack Mountains. The area is now blocked by the police, and I saw the police arguing with a group of guys in suits. Looking at the scene, it feels like they might fight at any time. Compared to these crappy things in reality, I pay more attention to the content of the plot. By the way, did you notice that when Red handed over his business card, Officer Johnny looked like he wanted to complain but had to hold it back, as if he had eaten something? Ha ha ha, it's really funny. Ha ha ha, that's right, Officer Johnny's expression is so funny, and Red, his personality is similar to that of many animation protagonists. Maybe he was chosen by the belt for this reason. Quote. Speaking of the belt, I think of the monsters that were also buried under the Adirondack Mountains. Why didn't we find any fossils or clues about these monsters before? It's impossible that the entire race was buried there. Quote. I also feel very puzzled. Could it be that an ultimate war took place in the super ancient times, causing these monsters and the civilization that sealed the monsters to be completely extinct, leaving only the Adirondack Mountains with some traces of civilization? Quote. You'd better wait for the archaeologists to answer this question for you. I just don't know if they dare to enter the ruins now. Quote. Don't worry, someone will definitely enter. The scene changes. A group of police officers have driven police cars to the scene of the accident. This is next to the 3rd Street building in Brooklyn. There are mysterious unknown creatures that have opened huge amounts of spider webs between the tall buildings. As the police officer reported the information, the picture shifted to the top of many police cars, where there was a super huge spider web with a diameter of more than 100 meters stuck between the floors. And in the middle, there was a weirdo who looked like a spider but could walk on 2 legs like a human. This was Zigumumuba, one of the many monsters resurrected by the mysterious figure. Not only did he have a sturdy body of nearly 2 meters in length, but he was also covered in gray-brown armor. In addition, the hideous bloody mouth could spit out extremely tough cobwebs, and the wrists could also extend and retract fangs and claws that were enough to break fine steel. Although, through the previous video playback, it has long been known that the monster buried under the Adirondack Mountains has been resurrected. But when the monster really appeared on the light screen, the audience watching the light screen couldn't stop their panic, because the monster looked too scary. And all this was actually intentional by Red himself. After all, the video played by the light screen is not like the special drama in the previous life. It needs to consider the audience and the review system. So, when creating this video, in order to make the audience better immersed in their own fictional future video, Red used the system's ability to make the monsters that appeared in it more realistic, and thoroughly displayed the extremely terrifying real posture of the Garangi clan to the world. And his approach soon ushered in the harvest. After watching this scene, Jessica screamed subconsciously, and then fell into Gwen's arms with a panicked look, not daring to look at the light screen again. As for Gwen herself, although she was still watching the future video, but if you look closely, you will find that her lips are trembling at a speed visible to the naked eye, and she is obviously scared. Hey, Ned, you are a brave man, how can you be scared by the fake monster in the video? Midtown High School, Queens, New York. Ned Leeds looked terrified at the spider monster on the screen, but he still forced himself to watch the future video. But his big hands had been tightly holding his good brother Peter Parker's arms since I don't know when. This made Peter Parker scream in pain. Ned, you are holding too hard, and don't you think your posture is very problematic? If other students see it, they will misunderstand our relationship. Oh, sorry, I was just a little too nervous just now. Next time. No, get out of the way. Hearing this, Ned quickly let go of his hand that was holding Peter Parker's arm. But at this time, the next picture played on the screen scared him to grab Peter's arm again, and then let out a shrill cry. This immediately attracted the attention of other students in the class. When they noticed that Ned was holding Peter Parker's arm in such an ambiguous posture, their eyes suddenly became warm. Peter Parker was a little bit in tears. Let's not talk about the situation of Gwen Stacy and Peter Parker. The video on the screen also played a tense and exciting moment at this time. On the huge amounts of spider webs, watching a group of Lindo dare to approach his hunting range, the spider monster Gumu's face flashed a fierce look. Then he jumped down from the spider web, rushed to the front of a group of policemen at a very fast speed, and then used his fangs and claws to instantly pierce the necks of 2 policemen, and hung their bodies on his spider web. Fire immediately. Seeing his colleagues die in the hands of this mysterious creature, the police officer in charge of the team roared and ordered to shoot. Bang! 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 The next second, gunshots rang constantly. Countless bullets flashing with golden luster shot out from the muzzle and hit Gumu's body at a high speed. However, this firepower offensive that was enough to destroy any flesh and blood body only left a few slight dents on the body of this spider monster, which could not cause any effective damage to it. The audience in reality saw this scene and showed surprise. Obviously. Even they couldn't believe it. There are people in this world who can block bullets with flesh and blood. You know, even the group of Zetori soldiers who invaded Blue Star would still bleed after being hit by a bullet. In such a surprised mood, the light screen played heavy music at the right time, which seemed to indicate how powerful the enemy that humans would face next was. At the same time, it also allowed the audience to immerse themselves in the video better. Provide Lin Luo with an endless supply of legends and progress in unlocking templates. Humph, is Linduo so weak now? Gently patting his sturdy body, Gumu spoke the unique language of the Garangi clan with a contemptuous tone, and then rushed into the crowd and began to kill crazily. Suddenly, countless blood and limbs were splattered on the street. Faced with such a bloody scene, a police officer was completely frightened. Taking advantage of the air attack of the spider monster against other companions, he directly got into a police car, stepped on the accelerator and drove away. However, he wanted to escape, which did not mean that Gumu would let him go. Looking at the police car gradually going away, Gumu directly spit out a ball of cobweb from his fang-filled mouth, broke the windshield at the rear of the car at a very fast speed, and tightly wrapped around the neck of the fleeing police officer. Then, he hung in the air, slowly retracting the cobweb while approaching the speeding police car. On the other side, at the Brooklyn Police Headquarters, Red and Gwen Stacy had already arrived at the first floor of the police station with a briefcase containing a stone belt, ready to take it back to the State University of New York for research. Before they could walk out of the police station, an out-of-control police car crashed into it and hit Gwen hard. Faced with this sudden crisis, Red subconsciously pounced on Gwen and rolled her to the corner of the first floor, thus avoiding the collision of the police car. But the briefcase in his hand accidentally fell on the table beside him, causing the stone belt placed in the box to fall out. At this time, the out-of-control police car stopped. Then the car door slowly opened, and a monster covered in gray-brown armor walked out. He was the spider monster who had appeared on the street and killed police crazily before, Gumu. Moreover, the moment this monster came out, it seemed as if it smelled something familiar. It turned its head and looked at the stone belt that fell on the ground, and then uttered a low voice. Huh. Is this my belt? While speaking, Gumu subconsciously moved his feet and walked towards the stone belt. But at this time, the police officers in the police station also came back to their senses from the riot just now, and then quickly pulled out their pistols and pulled the trigger. Bang! 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 In an instant, countless bullets hit Gumu's solid armor again. But apart from sparks, no substantial damage was caused. Faced with such a horrifying scene, the police officers showed stunned expressions. Obviously, even they did not expect that the spider monster in front of them would have such a terrifying defensive ability. On the other side, Gumu seemed to be annoyed by the actions of the police officers. He ignored the stone belt not far away and rushed into the crowd to start a crazy killing again. After a while, the police headquarters was stained with a layer of scarlet. On the other side, the stone belt seemed to have sensed the breath of the deadly enemy. It immediately made a sound and enveloped Reed with a strong light. At this moment, the familiar warrior figure appeared in his mind again. Although it was not very clear, he could still see that the warrior was wearing red armor, with unique scarlet compound eyes and golden horns, and the silver belt shining with mysterious luster. Here you go again, what on earth do you want to tell me? Red covered his head, feeling his brain in a mess. But after seeing the police officers die tragically at the hands of the mysterious creature, he simply made up his mind and followed his instinct to roll over to the stone belt. Red, what are you trying to do? I'm going to try to wear it. My instinct tells me that this is the only way to save everyone here. Faced with Gwen's worried words, Red hurriedly responded, and then buckled the belt around his waist with a resolute expression. At this moment, a dazzling white light flashed instantly, causing all the survivors in the police station to subconsciously close their eyes. Even Gumam was no exception to this. Fortunately, this dazzling white light did not last long and soon dissipated. Woo! However, Red let out a painful roar at this time, and beads of sweat as big as beans instantly burst out from his forehead and dripped onto the blood-stained ground. This is a lie, the belt was actually absorbed into Red's body. Quote. Gwen opened her eyes again and looked at Red again, but the scene in front of her shocked her and she showed an unbelievable expression. It turned out that the stone belt that was previously buckled around Red's waist had disappeared, leaving only burn scars on his abdomen. All this silently showed that the mysterious belt had been completely absorbed into Red's body. Gumam also knew this very well. As a Garangi who survived the super ancient times, he knew the secret of this belt better than anyone else. There is only one possibility for this phenomenon, that is, the Yaguru spirit stone in the belt chose this Linduo as its new fit person. I'm really underestimated. Quote. Yaguru, you don't think that you can defeat me, who is from the Z group, by temporarily choosing a Linduo as your fit person. Gumu snorted coldly, grabbed Red's neck, and threw him to the open space outside the police station. Then he immediately followed and continued to hit the new fit person chosen by Yaguru. Linduo. It seems that this is a general term for human species in the super ancient period. As for the belt, according to Spider-Man, it seems that it has a certain degree of intelligence and can choose its host independently. This is a bit unexpected. I didn't expect that humans in the super ancient period could develop a civilization that is completely different from modern ones. Quote. Because of the light screen translation. Tony Stark was able to know what the spider monster named Gumu said. This made him interested in the civilization of the super ancient times, and he quickly ordered Jarvis to summarize the information to see if he could find some extra clues. On the other hand, Pepper showed a very worried expression at this time. She looked at Red, who was being tortured by the spider monster on the light screen, and said distressedly, "The child named Red is so pitiful. I feel that if he continues to be tortured like this, he will soon die in the hands of the spider monster. Don't worry, this is just a temporary pain." Tony took out a bottle of collector's edition whiskey from the wine cabinet, poured himself a glass of fine wine, and said, "This episode of the future video has been played to this level 1 segment, and it has been basically confirmed that the child named Red is the protagonist of this episode. Quote. Since he is the protagonist, he can't die so easily." After saying that, Tony took a sip of the wine glass, then looked at the light screen with anticipation, waiting for the subsequent plot development. "We can't take the beating like this, we must fight back." In the picture, Red was thrown out again by Gumam's huge force and fell heavily on the hard ground. However, even in such a desperate situation, he did not give up hope. Instead, he gritted his teeth and climbed up, then took the opportunity to punch the Spider-Man in the abdomen. Boom! With a loud bang, the strong muscles on Red's arms seemed to be twisted by a mysterious force. In the flickering light, a deep black strengthening layer was covered, and between the black strengthening muscles, there were 2 colors of gold and white. Strengthening the armor, it fits tightly like a precision mechanical part. Moreover, his arm also burst out with unprecedented strength at this moment, blasting the spider monster, who was originally unscathed by dozens of pistols. Hoo-hoo, shapeshifting, this is the key to defeating monsters. Red panted, staring at his left hand that had completely changed its shape. His heart was full of shock and joy. Because he could clearly feel an unprecedented power surging in his arm, as if this power could enable him to defeat any strong enemy. However, the joy had not completely faded. He caught a glimpse of the spider monster Gumu walking towards him again with heavy steps, which made him not think too much, and hurriedly swung his fist and hit again. Bang! Bang bang! Bang bang bang! Quote. Instantly, the sound of hitting continued. Under this sound that resounded through the sky, Red's body completely metamorphosed in the strong energy fluctuations. Not only his arms, but also his legs, chest, and head began to be twisted by a mysterious force. Finally, he transformed into a warrior with golden horns, red compound eyes, and white flesh armor all over his body. And at this moment, he threw a powerful punch, directly blasting the Spider-Man hundreds of meters away and landing on the floor opposite the police headquarters. And Gwen Stacy happened to run out of the police station at this time and witnessed all this happening with her own eyes. Red, he has transformed. Quote. It is indeed a product left by the ancient civilization. It can actually make an ordinary person gain extraordinary power to fight against monsters with just a belt. On the military truck heading to the Adirondack Mountains, Captain Bronski stood up from his seat instantly and stared at the screen. Looking at the figure of the White Warrior in the video, his eyes were full of unprecedented greed. Red is just an ordinary person, and after successfully combining with the belt, he can obtain such powerful power. In this comparison, if he can be replaced by an excellent soldier like him and combine with the belt, I am afraid he will get more powerful power. Imagining this picture, Captain Bronski's greedy eyes became even hotter. At the same time, S.H.I.E.L.D., Triskel Building. Nick Fury also felt excited when he saw this scene. He thought that if S.H.I.E.L.D. could master the technology of making belts, they might be able to directly create an invincible Avengers team and beat all the aliens who dared to spy on the Blue Planet. In addition, he was also interested in Red in the video. Especially when he saw him facing the Spider-Man, he still waved his fist without fear, and his only intact eye flashed with admiration. Both his character and courage are excellent. This young man is definitely a good seedling. Or, just arrange an agent to observe him for a while. If he meets the standards, he will be directly included in the Avengers plan. The more he looked, the more satisfied he felt. Nick Fury thought for a moment and soon made a decision. Then he reached out to the phone on the desk. Natasha Romanoff, please come to headquarters now. Huff. Bang. Red panted and slowly retracted his fist. But at this moment, an indescribable feeling of powerlessness suddenly swept over his body, causing him to fall directly to the ground. What's going on? Why am I so tired? Red struggled to raise his hands. He could clearly feel a scorching power flowing from his abdomen to his whole body, making him stronger every moment. But in this process, His body also began to feel powerless. It was as if all the nutrients in his body were squeezed out at this moment, making him feel uncomfortable and kneeling on the spot. No wonder your strength is so much weaker than expected. It turns out that your horns have become smaller. On the other side, Gumam had already climbed up from the opposite floor. When he noticed the young horns on Red's forehead, he couldn't help but chuckle and made a low sound. But this is expected. After all, you are just an ordinary Lindo. You have reached your limit to this extent. So, you should just accept your fate and let me, as a member of the Z group, completely destroy you. After saying that, Gumam didn't care whether Red understood his words or not. He jumped into the air, crossed a distance of hundreds of meters and rushed to him. Then he knocked him to the ground with a diamond arm, and then added a roundhouse kick. Bang! With a loud bang, Red was kicked out on the spot, and the whole person rotated several times in the air before falling to the hard ground. Do you feel it? This is the absolute difference in strength. The attack worked, and Gumam did not choose to pursue the victory, but continued to wriggle his ferocious mouthparts, speaking the unique language of the Garangi clan to mock the new fit person chosen by Yaguru. But just as he said this, he saw Red struggling to get up from the ground and then came to the back of a large truck. Ah! With a roar, Red pushed a large truck weighing more than 10 tons and hit it hard forward regardless of his fatigue. Gumumu, who was caught off guard, was hit into the building behind him by the large truck pushed by Red. In reality, the audience took a breath of cold air when they saw this scene, and then discussed it frantically on the internet. Obviously, these viewers were shocked by the power displayed by Red, who had obtained the super ancient power. At the same time, Red himself, who was in the library, couldn't help but raise his mouth slightly when he saw the crazy accumulation of legends on the system panel and the progress of templates being unlocked. The growth rate far exceeded expectations. At this rate, it might not take long before he can display the ultimate power of the void in reality. Thinking of this, Red looked at the light curtain with more and more expectation. Did it succeed? Slowly stopping, Red looked at the truck that was almost completely sunken in the building, and muttered to himself. But at this moment, a familiar roar came from the building. HMPH. New fit, is this all you can do? In an instant, the large truck that was originally sunken in the building was pushed out by Gumam, and then a ball of cobweb sprayed out from its wriggling mouthparts, tightly wrapped around Red's left arm. Not good. Looking at the cobweb on his arm, Red's face suddenly changed, as if he realized that something was wrong. And the fact was as he expected. The next second, Gumam had jumped into a building tens of meters high, and then quickly twisted his head, using the force of inertia to throw Red into the air. Bang! With a bang, the wall made of reinforced concrete was hit by Red's back and cracked, and then he began to fall straight to the ground. Fortunately, Red reached out and grabbed the water pipe next to the building in time, thus avoiding falling from the building tens of meters high. But the crisis was not resolved. Red knew that on this high wall with a 90-degree inclination, his sensitivity would be greatly reduced. If he fought with the spider monster who was good at climbing in this environment, it would only be a dead end. So he didn't dare to delay for a moment, and hurriedly grabbed the water pipe and climbed up all the way until he crossed the wall on the rooftop, and then stopped. On the other side, Gumam had also climbed up along the smooth wall, and then walked forward slowly with a calm mentality, while wriggling his ferocious mouthparts, and said in a cold tone. Fit, your strength is too weak, and you have not exerted the potential of the Yaguru Spirit Stone at all. You are not qualified to be called Kuga like this. After that, Gumam's eyes flashed with a cruel light, and then he clenched his fists and showed the fang-like claws hidden inside his wrists. Hoo. Sorry, I don't understand your language. Please speak English next time. Definitely, Chinese is fine too, I can understand that too. Red stood up with his back against the large air conditioning condenser behind him, watching the Spider-Man vigilantly while making a subconscious joke. Gumu didn't say anything about his joke, but just raised his right arm and stabbed forward. It was so fast that it seemed that it would pierce Red's body in the next second. But Red, who had been aware of the precautions, still dodged with his agility. However, the large air conditioning condenser behind him was not so lucky. It was torn apart by Gumu's claws on the spot, leaving only the broken shell of the body. Seeing this scene, Red swallowed his throat and raised his vigilance to the maximum against the Spider-Man's claws. At this time, Gumu waved his claws again and rushed towards Red, who was covered in pure white flesh armor. At this point, a fierce battle has completely started on the empty rooftop. In reality, the light screen also played the symphony of the battle in a timely manner. And countless viewers who were watching this battle had stopped other things at hand and concentrated on this thrilling battle. On the screen, on the empty rooftop, the warriors covered with pure white meat armor and black strengthening muscles are trying their best to dodge the fierce attack of the spider monster Gumu. After all, before this, Red was just an adventurer who loved adventure, and he had no fighting experience. In contrast, Gumu is different. As a member of the proud Gulongjizi group, he has experienced countless life and death battles to achieve today's achievements. Therefore, not only is his own strength terrifying, but his combat experience is far superior to Red. After a short fight, the warrior form that Red transformed into was suppressed by Gumum. Even the sturdy pure white flesh armor was torn with countless scars, and bright red blood was seeping out bit by bit. In the end, the cobweb spit out by the spider monster wrapped around his neck, and then pressed on the guardrail of the rooftop. It's all over, the fit won. Next, die in the hands of the warrior Z Gumum who hunts Lindo with your incompetence and regret. Gumum issued the final death announcement from the mouthparts that spit out cobwebs, and then exerted force with both hands, swinging the fang-like claws at his wrists and stabbing Red's head fiercely. If he hadn't reacted quickly and grabbed the spider monster's hands in time, he would have died long ago. But the situation is still not optimistic. After all, Red himself is transforming for the first time, and he is still trapped in the problem of insufficient physical strength, which makes it impossible to fully exert his strength. This made him gradually lose the upper hand in this struggle, and he could only watch Gumumu's fang-like claws approach him little by little. Rumble. And at this critical moment, with the sound of the rotor turning rapidly, a military-armed helicopter came quickly from the distant sky and soon arrived on the rooftop. Then, Johnny Stone stuck his head out with a pistol in his hand and looked at the two figures fighting each other at the guardrail of the rooftop. There are actually two monsters. Although, he was a little surprised that there were two monsters, not one as stated in the intelligence. But seeing the enemy in front of him, Johnny Stone didn't think much, and directly raised his pistol and pointed it at the two people fighting and pulled the trigger repeatedly. But his action not only did not cause any harm to the spider monster. On the contrary, it aroused his anger. Because Gumumu would never allow other Lindo warriors to intervene in the battle between him and Kuga. So, he simply stopped and used his great strength to throw Red out again, then turned his head to look at the armed helicopter above his head, and the 6 compound eyes on his face suddenly flashed a fierce look. Humph, since you have chosen to intervene, I will get rid of you first. As he spoke, Gumumu opened his hideous mouthparts and spit out tough cobwebs to wrap around the armed helicopter. Then he slowly tightened the cobweb and pulled his body onto the helicopter. Bang! 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 On the helicopter, Johnny Stone looked at the approaching Spider-Man without any fear. He raised his gun and pulled the trigger, aiming at Gumu's chest and emptying the magazine on the spot. However, the damage caused by these bullets shining with golden luster was negligible. Gumu just patted his chest, and the bullet marks caused by the bullets returned to their original state. Then he moved his ferocious mouthparts and said slowly, "How can a mere bow and arrow hurt my well-trained body? So you should give up, Lindo's warrior." As he said that, Gumu raised the fang-like claws on his wrist and stabbed in the dim helicopter. Johnny. Although his brother was right beside him. But looking at the picture played on the screen, Susan couldn't help but make a worried sound, and her eyes were instantly filled with a layer of mist. "It's okay, Susan, I'm still here." Johnny patted Susan on the back and said comforting words. But his eyes looking at the light screen became solemn from some point on, and he was obviously affected by the future clips played by the light screen. In the picture, Officer Johnny was about to die in the hands of Spider-Man. The armed helicopter shook suddenly at this time. Then, Red's arms covered with pure white flesh armor and black strengthening muscles stretched out from behind, tightly locked Gumumu's arms and neck, and successfully blocked the fang-like claws that were about to stab out. "Fit, don't try to stop me." Gumumu didn't want to let Lindo, who dared to offend him, go so easily, so he began to struggle frantically on the spot. Suddenly, the armed helicopter, which was already shaking violently, shook even more violently, causing Red and Spider-Man to lose balance and fall outside. Then, on the landing gear outside the helicopter, they continued to fight desperately until Red caught the flaw that Gumu accidentally revealed, and then he successfully kicked the monster down. Woo-ah-ah-ah-ah. In that shrill scream, Gumu fell straight down from a height of dozens of meters, smashed through the hard ground of the rooftop, and disappeared in the smoke and dust. Only the panting of Red and Johnny Stone echoed inside the helicopter. You saved me. After a while, Johnny Stone stood up with the help of the smooth body, and then looked at the mysterious creature in front of him that looked like a stag beetle, and spoke slowly with a hesitant tone. In the face of the inquiry, Red didn't say anything, but just nodded calmly, and then stretched out his right hand and raised a thumb. At this time, it was dusk when the sun was setting. Under the setting sun, even through Kuga's red compound eyes, Johnny Stone could still feel the smile under the mask, which made him stunned for a moment. While he was stunned, the ancient warrior Kuga, transformed by Red, jumped directly from the armed helicopter and disappeared on the street at dusk. The last picture was Johnny Stone sitting alone on the armed helicopter, silently watching the direction where the white figure disappeared. After a long time, he seemed to remember something, raised his right hand, and slowly made a thumbs-up gesture. No way, could it be him? As this sentence fell, the picture on the screen gradually dimmed. This means that the level 1 segment of the future video played this time has ended, and the second stage is currently loading slowly. And during this waiting process, the audience in reality also began to discuss. How come it's over now? Light screen, please load the second stage video for me immediately. I want to see Red's handsome battle. Hey, man, don't be so impatient. According to the rules of the light screen, it will probably take another half an hour to load. Oh, it will take another half an hour. But I want to see the subsequent future clips now. According to the last picture played by the light screen, it seems that Officer Johnny has discovered that Kuga's true identity is Red. I don't know how to deal with it later. In fact, half an hour will pass quickly. Also, have you noticed that although the spider monster looks scary, he doesn't seem to be the mysterious black shadow in the ruins? I feel that he is much weaker. Much weaker. Please, that spider monster is completely immune to bullet shooting, and with a light jump, he can jump to a building 30 or 40 meters high. This strength is compared with the existing superhero. I'm afraid only the Hulk can beat him. The above, I didn't mean weak like that, just comparing Spider-Man and the mysterious Black Shadow, I feel he is much weaker. Hearing you say that, I also have this feeling, then according to the information we have now, maybe, the mysterious Black Shadow will be the final boss. Yes, I have this feeling too. Outside, the audience was chatting on the internet. The light screen had loaded the second stage of the video, and the screen had begun to play. In a tea restaurant located on 3rd Street in Brooklyn, New York, Gwen was sitting quietly in the corner of the restaurant, her white fingers gently resting on the keyboard of her laptop, concentrating on translating the mysterious runes from the ancient ruins. It's so bright. At this time, Reed, who was sleeping on the sofa opposite, woke up slowly, stretched his body, and his voice was full of fatigue. Isn't this definitely natural? Gwen stopped her busy work and said with a hint of resentment, "You know, you slept for 11 hours in the restaurant. I'm sorry to have kept you waiting here for so long." Red scratched his cheek embarrassedly, and explained with an apologetic smile, "Yesterday was the first time in my life that I felt so exhausted, so I slept a little longer without realizing it. Oh, by the way, why don't we have a meal here? I'll treat you, just as compensation, and I can also take care of the store's business by the way. After all, the manager was so kind to let me sleep here for a whole night." With that, Red turned around and waved in the direction of the cashier without waiting for Gwen to reply, signaling the waiter to bring the menu. "I didn't sleep all night." On the other hand, seeing that Red didn't take yesterday's incident seriously, Gwen couldn't help but puff up her cheeks. "Not only did you see that video yesterday, but you were also attacked by strange mysterious creatures. Even your appearance has changed, Red. Aren't you afraid that something will happen to your body?" "Don't worry. I don't feel any discomfort in my body now." Hearing Gwen's question, Red subconsciously touched his abdomen. In fact, until this moment, he could clearly perceive an endless stream of energy emanating from it, as if it was constantly strengthening his body. Although he was also deeply worried about this. But facing Gwen's worried eyes, he still pretended to be indifferent to respond, not wanting to make her worry more. "You are too open-minded." Gwen was obviously not satisfied with Red's reply, and she could not help but speak more seriously. "I thought that after you became that look, Red, you might no longer exist. This made me worry all night." "Don't worry, that look is not uncontrollable." Red patted his chest and replied with confidence, "I have tested it in advance. When I have the idea of fighting, I will change into that white fighting posture, as if there is a key in my heart that opens some mysterious mechanism. Then when I don't have the idea of fighting, it changes back again, just as natural as the rise and fall of the tide." With this explanation, don't you think it is super simple and easy to understand? Isn't this something easy to understand? Problem. Forget it, you should go travel around the world as soon as possible. Quote. Gwen knew Red's character well, and knew that he was being stubborn, so she said directly with a tough attitude, "Don't come back to New York during this period. I'm afraid that if you continue to stay here, there will be some accidents, and I don't want you to continue to get involved in the incidents related to weirdos. As for the belt, I will explain it to Officer Johnny." Well, turning back to a pure adventurer and continuing to travel around the world is indeed my dream. Red scratched the back of his head and said slowly in a hesitant tone, "But I always have a strange feeling." Strange feeling. Faced with Gwen's inquiry, Red did not answer immediately. Instead, he pursed his lips and looked at his left fist with a complicated expression. For a moment, he fell into silence, and the air around him seemed to solidify. Only his slightly rising and falling chest showed his inner restlessness. At the same time, in the underground parking lot of the police headquarters in Brooklyn, Johnny Stone walked steadily to a police car and was taking out the key to open the door. Suddenly, Officer John called anxiously beside him. "Mr. Stone, please wait for me. Since the murder case at the ruins the day before yesterday, strange things have happened everywhere, right? Children disappeared mysteriously, cows were sucked dry of blood, and inexplicable noises were always heard at night. Why don't the higher-ups make these things public?" Johnny Stone did not answer Officer John's question immediately, but took him away from the police headquarters in the police car, and then slowly explained. "Unconfirmed life forms number 1 and number 2, so far no traces have been found, which means they are still hiding in the city. Haste of information disclosure in this situation will only increase the public's anxiety and fear, and may even evolve into new riots and $0 shopping activities. It is based on this idea that the higher-ups made the decision not to disclose intelligence in the conference room." But, Officer John hesitated, with deep worry on his face. "Correspondingly, our security forces will probably be strengthened." Knowing what Officer John was still worried about, Johnny Stone continued to add, "The police station has reported the situation to the higher-ups and asked for a batch of high-tech weapons. When this batch of weapons is delivered, the Metropolitan Police Department will give priority to distributing them to us. By then, I think these unconfirmed life forms will be solved by as soon." Great. Hearing this, the sadness on Officer John's face instantly disappeared, and he immediately turned into an excited expression. "This is really incredible news." Just as he was smiling, Johnny Stone finally arrived at the destination of this trip, then slowly parked the car on the side of the road, and walked alone towards the tea restaurant opposite with a steady pace. He stopped when he walked to the huge amounts of glass window outside the restaurant. He then bent down slightly, stretched out his slender and bony hand and gently knocked on the glass window. Red, who was leisurely eating lunch in the restaurant, was suddenly attracted by the sudden crisp knocking sound. His body shook slightly, and then he quickly turned his head to look. When his eyes caught that the knocker was Johnny Stone, Red subconsciously blinked quickly, his pupils full of puzzled light, obviously wondering why this police officer appeared here. In response, Johnny Stone did not say much, but pointed outside with the finger that had just knocked on the glass, signaling Red to come out first. "Gwen, wait for me here, I'll be back soon." Seeing this, Red did not think too much, turned his head and said briefly to Gwen beside him, then put down the tableware in his hand without hesitation, and ran out of the restaurant in a hurry. "If I misunderstood, please forget it. Walking on the quiet dense forest walkway next to the tea restaurant, Officer Johnny slightly turned his head to look at Red beside him, and spoke slowly with a hint of hesitation and uncertainty. Did you? Yes, I was the one who fought with the spider monster yesterday. Without the slightest hesitation, facing Officer Johnny's questioning, Red smiled brilliantly, and then raised his iconic thumbs up again. How could you reveal your superhero identity so easily? At Midtown High School, when Peter Parker saw the screen, he looked incredulous. Because in his opinion, except for superheroes like Iron Man and Captain America, other superheroes should hide their identities. After all, there are definitely many bad guys who are offended in the superhero industry. And exposing your true identity so casually will only cause unnecessary involvement of your relatives and friends. Unless, he is not afraid that the people around him will be hurt because of him. But is this possible? With such doubts, Peter Parker continued to watch the future video on the screen. Sure enough, you are the unconfirmed life form No. 2. Although he had expected it, when he heard Reed's reply, Johnny Stone still couldn't stop the surprise in his heart. He subconsciously opened his mouth and blurted out his voice uncontrollably. Red, what happened yesterday that made you look like that? Unconfirmed life form number 2. So the police gave me this name, it feels a little tongue-twisting. Faced with Officer Johnny's question, Red first smiled and scratched his cheek with embarrassment, and then slowly spoke. As for why you look like that, it should be related to the stone belt. At that time, Gwen and I were going to take this artifact back to the State University of New York for research, but the spider-like monster attacked the police headquarters, and then the belt burst into a ray of light, calling me to wear the belt to stop the spider monster. Then, I followed this call and put on the belt, and it drilled into my body, turning me into that look. You idiot, why did you take such a rash action? Aren't you afraid of becoming the same kind as that monster? Hearing this explanation, Johnny Stone couldn't help but yell at Red. He really couldn't understand why a prestigious school like the State University of New York, which is well known in the education field, would cultivate such a guy with such a rash and careless style of behavior. Well, how to say it? On the other hand, Red didn't take Johnny Stone's deafening roar to heart at all. Instead, he reached out and touched his chin leisurely, thinking quietly for a while, and then gave his answer with a relaxed smile. Because the belt needed me, and wanted me to stop the spider-like monster from killing innocent people, so I put it on. It's just a belt, are you sure your feeling is right? Sure. Red nodded. I tried it later and found that after wearing the belt, I have the ability to change my form at any time to fight. Just relying on feelings, without any basis, it is possible to become the same kind of monster. Amidst the fierce debate, Johnny Stone took out 2 photos taken on the rooftop yesterday from his pocket and handed them over. Look at how you looked yesterday, there is no human appearance at all. Is this what I look like after the transformation? This is even more handsome than I expected, so good. However, what he never expected was that facing the white and hideous self in the photo, Red not only did not show the slightest fear. On the contrary, his face was full of an extremely happy smile. This scene made Johnny Stone completely speechless. He sighed helplessly and couldn't help but reach out his hand to gently rub his frowning eyebrows. At this moment, Red's eyes were bright and he continued to ask, "Oh, by the way, Officer Johnny, what happened to the spider-like monster later? This matter has nothing to do with you now, don't ask so many questions." Johnny Stone didn't want Red to be involved in this matter, so he refused to answer this question without hesitation, and then took his hand without saying anything, and walked hurriedly towards the police car. Also, you should go to the hospital with me to check your body now. It is impossible that there will be no other changes or effects after the unknown belt is absorbed into your body. Don't, it's just a small matter, it's not necessary to go to the hospital. Mr. Stone. Officer Sidis just sent an emergency report, saying that a murder case was found in Greenwich Village. It is said to be very special, so I would like to ask you to go there. Just as the two were arguing, Officer John, who was originally responsible for guarding the police car, ran over in a hurry and interrupted the conversation between Johnny and Red. What? Hearing this, Johnny Stone's face suddenly changed, and he didn't care to take Red to the hospital for a while. Finally, He could only quickly take out a pen and a notebook from his pocket, and the tip of the pen moved quickly on the paper. After writing down an address and a contact number, he tore off the paper without hesitation and handed it to Red. Red, go to the special surgery hospital later and find the doctor above. Just say that Johnny Stone asked you to come. She will do a detailed examination for you for free. After that, Johnny Stone and Officer John left the scene in a hurry without stopping. Only Red was left standing there alone, staring at the small note in his hand, his lips moving slightly, and he slowly read out the English words on it. Special Surgery Hospital Christine Palmer. Puff. Christine spit out the coffee she had just drunk, then widened her eyes, with an expression of incredible shock on her face, staring at the small note with her name and contact information on the screen. This is not referring to me. Ms. Sidis, I'm so sorry. I'm late because of something. The scene changed. Outside the Catholic Church in Greenwich Village, Johnny Stone jumped out of the police car in a hurry, then crossed the cordon and came to the side of a black female police officer, and got straight to the point. I wonder what you want to know from our security department. I'm sorry to ask you to come here specially. Facing Johnny Stone's puzzled look, Officer Sidis first responded with a polite smile, then straightened his face and started talking about business. Actually, I am concerned about decedent's wound. In the recent cases, all the victims have the same feature, that is, there are 2 teeth marks on their necks that look like they were bitten by sharp teeth, and there is a large amount of blood loss on their bodies, which is like being sucked by vampires. It is a completely extraordinary event. So, I want to ask, is it possible that the 2 unconfirmed life forms that survived the accident last night were responsible? While talking, Officer Sidis brought Johnny Stone to decedent's body, gently uncovered the white cloth covering it, and let him carefully look at the shocking wound on decedent's body. Looking at the particularly obvious tooth marks on the body, Johnny Stone quickly frowned, shook his head repeatedly, and responded without hesitation. No, I remember that the mouth shape of unconfirmed life forms number 1 and number 2 is completely different from the tooth marks on the body. Is that so? Officer Sidis slowly lowered his head, his eyes slightly closed, revealing a thoughtful expression. After a while, she raised her head again, squinted her eyes slightly, looked at the scorching sun hanging in the blue sky, and continued to ask. Then, Mr. Stone, do you know if the 2 unconfirmed life forms have any specific light fear? No. Johnny Stone shook his head again, and then a puzzled look appeared on his face, and asked puzzledly, Ms. Sidis, this question should have nothing to do with this case, right? Is there something else going on? Well, because not long ago, we received a call from a drunk. Police officer Sidis spoke with a hint of hesitation and uncertainty. According to him, he was attacked by an unknown monster last night and almost died. As a result, the sun rose at that time, and then the monster let out a fearful roar and ran away. Hearing this, Johnny Stone's eyebrows also frowned tightly, and he fell into deep thought. After a long time, he slowly spoke in a hesitant tone. Could it be that there is a 3rd unconfirmed life form here? Hearing this, Officer Sidis's face changed instantly, and he subconsciously looked at Johnny Stone, only to find that both of them had a solemn look in their eyes. At the same time, Red, who had previously overheard the conversation between Johnny Stone and Officer John, also rushed to the scene driven by curiosity, and through the conversation between a mother and daughter who were chatting next to him, he unexpectedly discovered a key clue that even the police had not noticed. According to common sense, this time period should be the opening time of the Catholic Church. But the church here has not opened its doors for a long time, and a murder has occurred next to it, and no priest has come out to understand the situation. There must be something wrong. While thinking, Red, who was hiding in the crowd of onlookers, subconsciously turned his head to look at the Catholic Church next to the crime scene. Then he quickly took a step and walked towards the direction of the church step by step. New York is really full of disasters. Shield, Triskelion Building. At the moment Natasha Romanoff has walked elegantly into the director's office, standing side by side with Nick Fury in front of the huge amounts of French windows, watching the future video on the screen with a focused look. When she saw this scene playing on the screen, she couldn't help but slightly raise her head and sighed with her red lips. The spider monster hasn't been dealt with yet, and now an unconfirmed life form number 3 similar to a vampire has come out. From this point of view, the future situation is not optimistic. Don't worry, since some tragedies have been known in advance, they will never happen again. Knowing what Natasha Romanoff was worried about, Nick Fury pulled his low and magnetic voice and slowly said, "Moreover, I also specially sent Phil Coulson to take charge of this matter. I will never let these monsters escape from the seal so easily." Hearing what you said, I feel a lot more at ease. Hearing this, Natasha Romanoff couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief, and then raised her thin eyebrows and asked, "It's only 8 o'clock in the morning, and it's not even the usual working time, you called me here. It seems that this mission is not easy, Director. Don't think about it." Nick Fury slowly turned his head and looked at Natasha with his only remaining intact eye. Romanoff said in a deep voice, "This mission is just to let you observe a guy who may become a member of the Avengers." "Oh. Do you mean?" Natasha Romanoff glanced at the light screen subconsciously, and a thoughtful look flashed across her charming face. "Well, it's the superhero introduced by the light screen this time. Reed. As far as the presentation in the future video is concerned, this child is excellent in both character and courage, and he definitely has the ability to become one of us, so I hope you go to the State University of New York and observe him carefully for a while. If he meets the standards, then directly invite him to join us." While speaking, Nick Fury took out a prepared document from the drawer and handed it to Natasha Romanoff, so that she could understand the living habits of the person she needed to observe this time. Taking the personal information about Reed, Natasha Romanoff began to read it page by page. Soon, she had a preliminary understanding of the person she needed to observe this time, and then she spoke slowly. "No problem, I'll take the mission this time, and I'll take a break. Well, I'll trouble you next." During the conversation, Natasha Romanoff had already left the director's office with Reed's personal information. Nick Fury was left standing alone in front of the huge amounts of floor-to-ceiling windows, his eyes deep and far away, looking at the light curtain that kept flickering and changing far above the sky, and fell into deep thought. "Hello, is there anyone inside?" In the picture, Reed had already arrived at the solemn main entrance of the Catholic Church, then he slowly stretched out his hand, gently knocked on the door frame, and shouted loudly at the same time. However, no matter how he called out, no one responded in the seemingly quiet church, and only his voice echoed in the empty surroundings. Seeing this, Red simply stopped knocking on the door and quickly walked to the side of the church. After searching for a while, he finally found a window that could be opened, and then climbed through the window without hesitation. "Sorry, I disturb you." Walking inside the closed and quiet church, Red muttered to himself softly, slowly opened a door in front of him, and then carefully poked his head out. His eyes were like searchlights, nervously and attentively observing the scenery in the main hall of the church. The neatly arranged seats, the solemn portraits of God hanging on the walls, the stained glass that became dreamy under the influence of light, and the unique architectural style formed by the ancient Roman vault structure and the Latin cross, all of which were seen by him one by one, but he could not find the figure of the priest. This inevitably made Red feel a little worried, so he boldly walked to the center of the main hall of the church and looked around attentively. During this process, a strong look of worry quietly appeared on his face. Although everything in the church was the same as usual, and there was not much difference from other Catholic churches he had visited before. But Red always felt flustered, as if there was some kind of evil monster lurking in this sacred and solemn church, and it seemed that it would suddenly rush out from a dark corner at any time and devour him mercilessly. He could even vaguely smell a hint of blood. This made Red feel more and more uneasy, and the speed of observing the surrounding scenery began to gradually speed up. At this moment, when his eyes moved to the door on the other side, he was surprised to find that a cold and piercing gaze was silently staring at him through the crack of the door. "Ah. Hello, are you Father Haas?" Looking at the pair of eyes that were obviously cold, Red suddenly woke up from his dream and remembered that he had entered the church without permission. He immediately raised a smile with embarrassment and apology on his face and asked carefully. Bang! While he was talking, the door engraved with the seal of God was suddenly thrown open, and a priest with short black hair and metal earrings walked slowly from the side door with extremely heavy steps. This scared Red a lot. He mistakenly thought that the other party was looking for him to blame, so he waved his hands and shouted. "Ah! Wait a minute, I heard that something happened to you, father, so. However, Red's explanation did not seem to change the attitude of the priest at all. He still looked furious. But when the priest walked to the middle aisle with neatly arranged seats, a glaring ray of sunlight suddenly shone into the church, scaring the priest so much that he instantly showed a horrified expression and stopped involuntarily. Such a strange scene made Red subconsciously turn his head to look at the place where the sunlight came in. There happened to be a small window with a Catholic pattern there. The dazzling sunlight poured on the stained glass, instantly turning into colorful and brilliant light, reflecting in the dark church, adding a new color to it. And the indifferent priest stood outside the light, staring at Red standing in the middle of the light. During this period, he said nothing and no longer approached Red step by step as before. Well, since you are fine, I will go back first. But the cold eyes still made Red feel uncomfortable, so he simply waved his hand to say goodbye, then turned and walked quickly towards the side door. In response, the priest still did not choose to stop him, but reached out and gently touched his earrings, muttering to himself. This linduo exudes a disgusting smell. As these words fell, the priest slowly retreated, his figure gradually disappearing into the depths of the dark church. On the other side, Reed turned his head again before leaving, and found that the priest had disappeared. He did not think too much, and directly closed the door and climbed out of the window to leave the church. As he left, the picture on the light curtain finally stopped on the main pulpit of the church. There happened to be a completely withered corpse hidden, with only a trace of bloody smell, indicating that the corpse had just been killed not long ago. I didn't expect that the real priest died under the cross of the Catholic Church. In the class, Jessica looked at the last frozen picture on the light curtain and couldn't help but sigh. Compared to this, I am more concerned about another issue. Different from Jessica's focus, Gwen Stacy beside her stared at the depths of the church where the priest's figure slowly disappeared in the picture, and her expression gradually became solemn. What's the problem? Hearing her friend's words, Jessica raised her eyebrows and asked with interest. Jessica, haven't you discovered it yet? Gwen subconsciously asked back to Jessica's question, and then explained, from the clips played on the light screen, this priest is undoubtedly the unconfirmed life form number 3, but look at his current appearance, what is the difference between him and the unconfirmed life form number 1 spider monster that appeared before? Difference. After hearing this, Jessica began to think, and after a while, she widened her eyes and exclaimed, yes, the priest seems to be human, which is completely different from the spider monster that appeared before. That's right. Gwen nodded, and then said, the previous unconfirmed life form number 1 and the mysterious black shadow that appeared in the super ancient ruins both appeared in the form of monsters, but when the unconfirmed life form number 3 appeared, it was in the form of a human. This shows that these monsters are likely to have the ability to freely transform into both human and monster forms. Hearing this, a solemn look appeared on Jessica's face. Obviously, even someone like her who was always smiling and joking began to realize the seriousness of the situation. After all, this group of monsters was difficult to deal with, and now it was confirmed that they had the ability to freely transform into humans, which indirectly showed that they could hide freely among the crowd. If this was true, there was no doubt that this would add difficulty to Red and the police in the subsequent actions to deal with the monsters. Thinking of this, Jessica couldn't help but look at the light curtain again with a worried look, and murmured to herself. I hope Red on the light curtain can solve all the monsters safely. That's it. I really admire Red. He slept all night, but he went out for 2 hours, making me wait in the tea restaurant. In the tea restaurant, Gwen was sitting on the sofa with her mobile phone in her hand, complaining to her colleagues about Red's unreliability. While talking, she caught Red's figure returning to the tea restaurant from the corner of her eye, so she continued to talk and waved her little hand to pat him gently. But at this moment, the colleague on the other end of the phone suddenly mentioned something important. This made Gwen have no time to continue playing around. She quickly pointed to her mobile phone, signaling Red to help her hold the phone first, and then took out a notebook from her bag, recording while asking. Is that so? Where is the funeral? Yes, it's Greenwood Cemetery in Brooklyn, right? Okay, I see. Thank you so much for telling me this, Makoto. After a series of conversations, Gwen hung up the phone and said to Red beside her. I just received a call from a colleague. I may have to go to Greenwood Cemetery tomorrow to attend Professor Jimmy's funeral, so I'd better find a place to stay nearby for one night. Is that so? Red narrowed his eyes and said thoughtfully, it just so happens that I also have something I care about. I plan to go to the police headquarters again tonight. Go to the police headquarters again. Well, I just went to Greenwich Village, and something terrible happened there. As Gwen and Red talked, the two slowly disappeared in the tea restaurant. The scene changed. At the moment, it was already late at night. Johnny Stone, who was on standby at the police headquarters, heard the announcement from the intercom. Notify all state police departments that unidentified life form number 3 has appeared, please go immediately. Repeat again, notify all state police departments that unidentified life form number 3 has appeared, please go immediately. As the announcement sounded, Johnny Stone, who had been waiting for a long time, hurriedly started the police car and rushed towards the location mentioned in the intercom. But he had no idea that Red was driving a white motorcycle closely behind him. Ah! A police officer fell from a floor tens of meters high amid the screams. Several police officers below hurriedly reached out to try to catch their colleague, but the strong inertia still made them fall to the ground together. The police officer who was caught was already dead at the moment. Only the 2 teeth marks left on his neck showed how much torture he had suffered in his life. Seeing the miserable state of his colleague, the police officers turned their heads and looked at the tall building opposite with fear on their faces. There stood a monster that looked like a bat. And it was the murderer of these murders, named Zi Qiangmo Gu by the police as the unconfirmed life form No. 3. HMPH. As if he was very satisfied with Lin Duo's fear of him, Qiangmo made a low sound proudly. Then he flapped the membrane wings connected to his arms and body, flew down from the high building, and pounced on the police officers on the ground who had already been frightened. At this point, a killing officially began. Well, although I don't want to say this, I think it's time to update some equipment in the police system. On the open-air balcony of the Cliff Villa, watching the police officers on the light screen die tragically at the hands of the bat monster one by one, Tony, who was leisurely drinking fine wine, frowned and complained to Pepper beside him with dissatisfaction. An old Glock series pistol like this can't even penetrate the shell of an ordinary car, let alone use it to deal with this kind of monster from the ancient times. Isn't this clearly asking these police officers to make meaningless sacrifices? Don't worry, Tony. Knowing the worry hidden in Tony's complaints, Pepper quickly reached out and rubbed his temples, and replied, didn't Officer Johnny on the light screen say that the police department has applied to the superiors for more powerful weapons? I think by that time, these monsters won't be so rampant. I hope so. I don't think those bureaucrats will be so efficient. Although Pepper explained, Tony's tone remained unchanged, and he was still talking to himself with dissatisfaction. But he couldn't hide the worry in his eyes when he looked at the light screen. It's obvious that he was extremely concerned about the lives of these police officers. Beep beep. In the picture, just as the bat monster continued to kill. A police car approached the scene with the sirens getting louder and louder, and behind it was a figure driving a white motorcycle. At the moment, a police officer was sucked of all his blood by the Batman, and then his shrunken corpse was thrown in front of the car where they parked. Witnessing such a cruel scene, Johnny Stone and Red, who followed secretly, suddenly changed their expressions and immediately got out of the car and ran towards the surviving police officer. Mr. Policeman, wait for me a moment. Red waved and shouted at Johnny Stone in front of him, while running quickly, I'm here to help. Red, what are you doing here? Johnny Stone was extremely surprised and angry about Red's appearance. However, before he could say anything else, the screams of the police officers came again in front of him, which made him have no time to care about other things. He hurried to the surviving police officers, then took out his pistol and pointed it at the bat monster, and ordered, everyone, retreat immediately. As soon as he finished speaking, Johnny Stone pulled the trigger without hesitation. Suddenly, a series of sparks came out of the muzzle of the gun, and several bullets with a golden luster shot out from the muzzle, accurately hitting the dark gray body of the bat monster. During the shooting, Red also ran over and said, Mr. Police, let me get back. This is the job of the police. Johnny Stone roared without looking back. While rejecting Red, he quickly replaced the new magazine and continued shooting. But the body hardness of Cheng Mo was no less than that of the spider monster he dealt with yesterday. He squeezed out the bullets that hit his body one by just squirming his muscles, leaving only the sound of bullets falling to the ground. No effect at all again. Seeing this scene, Johnny Stone frowned, obviously also feeling tricky about the hardness of the bat monster's skin, but at this time, Red's figure suddenly passed by him. "You idiot. Go back quickly when I tell you to. Mr. Police. Leave it to me." Facing Johnny Stone's repeated warnings, Red responded and punched the bat monster in the abdomen. In an instant, black strengthening muscles and pure white flesh armor covered his right fist. And this was just the beginning. After a successful attack, Red immediately added several fierce attacks, and then transformed into a super ancient warrior Kuga again with a buzzing sound from the belt. Transformed. Seeing Red transform from a normal person into a warrior wearing pure white flesh armor in just a few seconds, Johnny Stone showed an expression of disbelief on his face. While he was shocked, Red, who was swinging his fists wildly, suddenly realized that something was wrong. That is, no matter how hard he punched, he could not make the bat monster in front of him move a little bit. Moreover, while enduring his attack, this monster also showed its ferocious fangs and sneered, "Lindu, a warrior, you should feel how to swing your fist." After that, the strong demon flashed and killed in front of Red in an instant, and then swung a heavy fist to hit the pure white flesh armor of the super ancient warrior Kuga. Suddenly, Red's body, which was as hard as fine steel, was hit and sparks flew. In the end, he was blown away by a punch and was beaten back to human form by the bat monster in front of him. Looking at Red, who fell miserably in the light curtain. The audience in reality also began to discuss it crazily on the internet. "Oh my god. This bat monster is too strong. Yes, the unconfirmed life form number 3 that appeared this time is much stronger than the previous spider monster. Red is not his opponent at all. I remember that in the memory passed to Red by the belt, the ancient warrior Sora was in Red form. Maybe Red has to unlock that form to deal with this bat monster. I have the same feeling. This young man named Red should not have exerted the true power of this belt, so he was defeated so miserably. Wow. Even so, I feel very unhappy. This battle is too miserable. It is simply a one-sided beating. It makes people angry. Bat monster." Just as the audience sent barrages and vented their emotions, the future video on the light curtain continued to play. "Hehe, Lindo warrior, use your blood to help me become stronger." Under the night, the bat monster moved its ferocious fangs, speaking the unique language of the Garangi tribe, and walked towards Red, who had turned back into human form. Bang! Bang bang! Seeing that the bat monster had come to Red's side, about to open its fangs and bite him hard. Johnny Stone also came to his senses at this time, quickly replaced the new magazine, and then pulled the trigger at the strong demon, interrupting the monster's idea of sucking Red's blood. "Lindo warrior using a bow and arrow, since you want to die in front, let me fulfill your wish." Slowly turning his head, the bat monster looked at Johnny Stone with a cold and piercing look, and then hit him on the shoulder with a claw. Ah! Beep beep. On the dark street, as Red and Johnny Stone fell one after another, the outcome of the battle was completely clear. But before the bat monster started to suck their blood, several police cars with headlights on drove from a distance and arrived at the dark battlefield. Suddenly, bright lights flashed on the bat monster, making him scream in pain, and then he turned around and disappeared under the night with his thin wings flapping. On the other side, after the police car stopped in the distance, Officer John hurriedly opened the door and ran to the unconscious Johnny Stone and helped him up. "Mr. Stone, please wake up. Don't fall asleep." Amid the shouts, Johnny Stone barely regained consciousness. Then, the picture on the light screen turned to Red, who had also fainted beside him, and froze at this scene. The picture turned. Time came to the early morning of the next day. Red, with gauze wrapped around his body, sat on a chair in the hospital corridor. He lowered his head, thinking about something, unlike his usual lively spirit. "Mr. Stone, your shoulder bone may be fractured. You must undergo a detailed examination." "It's okay. I can't feel the pain anymore. Thank you for your care." Bang! Johnny Stone, who came out of the emergency room, rejected the doctor's suggestion and walked towards the elevator entrance with a pale face. "Mr. Police." Seeing this, Red beside him shouted hurriedly. But Johnny Stone only paused for a moment, and then continued to walk towards the elevator, saying, "Are you still there? Didn't I tell you not to get involved in this case anymore?" Red hurriedly caught up with Johnny Stone, and then said, "I'm really sorry, it's all my fault. No need to say more." Johnny Stone didn't even turn his head, and replied in a cold tone, "After all, you are just an ordinary citizen." But, before Red finished speaking, Johnny Stone had already grabbed his collar and pushed him against the white wall of the hospital corridor. "You think you have gained the power to fight monsters, and you can fight however you want. But you have no obligation to fight at all. It is our duty as police officers to protect the citizens of this city. Don't get involved like you, a half-baked person." After all, Red was just an ordinary person before he gained the power of the belt. Now even if he has gained the power of the ancient times, it is obvious that he is still no match for those monsters. If he continues to get involved in events involving unconfirmed life forms, he will most likely lose his life. That's why Johnny Stone reprimanded him in such a harsh tone. Then, he let go of the hand that was grabbing Red's collar and entered the elevator with a sullen face. After a while, the elevator door slowly closed and carried him away from the floor. As for Red, he also fell into deep thought because of Johnny Stone's words. He has indeed gained enough power to resist those monsters, but it is still not enough to defeat them. Unless, he can evolve further. This thought flashed through Red's mind, and then he remembered the illusion that the belt had shown him. It was a warrior standing alone in the super ancient ruins. He had fully unfolded golden horns, red compound eyes, and red flesh armor covering his whole body. If he could transform into that posture, perhaps he would not lose to the bat monster. With this thought, Red unknowingly left the hospital and walked back to the hotel where he was temporarily staying. "You're so slow, Red." In the main lobby of the hotel, Gwen, who had been waiting for a long time, couldn't help complaining when she saw Red coming back. "What did you do again? You didn't come back all night." "Nothing." Red shook his head and replied with a depressed expression, "I was just thinking about the Red Warrior." "Red Warrior? Yeah." Red nodded gently, then sat down next to Gwen and said in a low voice, "In the illusion I saw before, the warrior was wearing red flesh armor, but the form I transformed into was pure white. So, I wonder if it's because my will is not strong enough that I can't reach that posture. I didn't expect that you, Red, would doubt that your will is not strong enough." Gwen Stacy subconsciously raised her eyebrows, and her tone was particularly surprised. "Definitely, just like the first transformation." As he spoke, Red pursed his lips, then looked at his hands with a complicated expression, as if resisting something. It seems that this young man named Red seems to be very resistant to fighting. Beside the pool of the Washington Monument, Sam Wilson, nicknamed Falcon, looked at Red, who was struggling on the light screen, and couldn't help but sigh with a hint of surprise. For some people who are kind and gentle by nature, this is a very normal reaction. Unlike Sam's surprise, Steve looked at the light screen with appreciation. However, he also knew that pure kindness could not help the young man named Red deal with these murderous monsters. So, the look at the light screen began to gradually change from appreciation to worry. On the screen of the light screen. After a short silence, Red noticed that Gwen had changed into a black dress. It turned out that today was the day of the funeral of Professor Jimmy, one of the victims of the ruins in the Adirondack Mountains. Recalling this, Red simply stopped being silent and accompanied Gwen Stacy to the Greenwood Cemetery to attend the funeral. It was during this trip that he met the victim's daughter, who was squatting in front of the stone gate of Greenwood Cemetery, sobbing silently. The crystal tears flowed from her eyes and dripped down the little girl's cheeks to the ground. She cried so sadly and so grief-stricken. Seeing all this, Red felt his own incompetence and weakness for the first time in his life. But at the same time, he seemed to have found what he lacked in the past. For example, the meaning of fighting. Bang! With a bang, Red's right fist hit the hard wall beside him heavily, leaving a clear fist mark. Then he turned around and sat on his white motorcycle, twisting the throttle with a pair of angry eyes that were enough to burn everything, and sped on the deserted streets. Although the screen did not indicate what Red's purpose was for driving away at the moment. But all the viewers immediately realized at this moment that Red's purpose of this trip was only one, that is, to completely solve the Garangi monster that killed others. realized this. The hearts of the audience seemed to be infected by Red's actions. I felt a surge of blood in my heart, and my eyes looking at the screen became more and more expectant. Hello, are you Mr. Rooney? At the same time, in order to find the trace of the Bat Monster, Johnny Stone came to a tavern with a slightly rough style, and then found the drunkard mentioned by Officer Sidis and asked, "Hey, what's wrong?" Perhaps because he had just drunk too much, Rooney's consciousness seemed a little confused. After replying in a daze, he turned around and picked up the big wine glass on the bar and took a big sip, looking like an old drunkard. "My name is Johnny Stone, and I'm the chief of the Brooklyn District Security Department." Confirming that he had not found the wrong person, Johnny Stone immediately sat down beside him and said, "I came to you this time to talk to you about the attack of the blood-sucking monster." "Oh, do you believe me?" Hearing the purpose of the police looking for him, Rooney's face suddenly showed a look of surprise, and he was obviously surprised that there was really a policeman who believed what he said. "Yes, there have been many murders in this area recently. I think your experience may help our police find some different clues." "Is that so? Okay. I'm drunk, let me tell you about some bad things I experienced last night." After hearing Johnny Stone's reply, Rooney became interested and told the policeman what happened last night. And listening to his story, Johnny Stone quickly captured the most important information from Rooney's words. "Mr. Rooney, you mean, have you ever seen a vampire monster fly into a church?" "Yes." Rooney nodded and replied, "It's the Catholic Church in Greenwich Village." "So that's the case, thank you, Mr. Rooney." After getting the information he wanted, Johnny Stone immediately said goodbye to Mr. Rooney, and then drove the police car to the outside of the Catholic Church. "It should be here." Coming out of the police car, Johnny Stone looked at the classical Catholic church in front of him, took a deep breath, and then took out a pre-prepared Remington 870 shotgun from the car, and stepped into the church alone. Yes. Because this action is a private act. So only Johnny Stone came here, and he also planned to use his own strength to solve the Bat Monster Zhongmo-Gu. The audience had to admire Johnny Stone's courage when they saw this scene. He dared to go and fight such a terrifying Bat Monster with only one person and a Remington 870 shotgun. This is simply fearless. Definitely, Johnny Stone himself in reality was also given Susan's cold eyes and blame for this, and had to make a bitter face and repeatedly assured that he would never be so reckless in reality. Bang! With a slight sound of the door opening, Johnny Stone slowly stepped into the main hall of the church. Then he raised the Remington 870 shotgun in his hand, ready to pull the trigger at any time, and carefully looked around to find the possible Bat Monster. However, his observation obviously had loopholes. He was only busy checking the corners where people might hide and the middle aisle where the seats were neatly arranged. He was completely unaware that Zhongmo-Gu, in a priest's uniform, was hanging upside down on the classical relief on the ceiling, looking at him silently with his head down. After a while, the monster showed a hideous evil smile on his face, and then his whole body was shrouded by a mysterious force, changing from a human form to a huge amounts of Bat Monster hanging on the classical relief, and then waving the thin wings connected to his arms and body, and pounced on Johnny Stone below. Quote! Quote. Hearing the strange sound coming from behind, Johnny Stone's expression froze, and he quickly turned his head to look behind him. When he saw the monster emitting blood, waving thin wings and flying towards him with fangs, he pulled the trigger without hesitation. Bang! Bang bang! There was a bang. Countless specially made conical projectiles ejected from the sparks of the muzzle, hitting the unconfirmed life form number 3 that was flying down at an angle. The effect of the shotgun was far beyond that of ordinary firearms. It not only interrupted the fierce attack of the Bat Monster, but also directly knocked it down to the neatly arranged seats. But even if it was effective, Johnny Stone still did not dare to slack off. He immediately aimed at the place where the unconfirmed life form number 3 fell and fired another shot. In an instant, countless conical projectiles shot head-on, directly hitting the rows of seats into fragments and scattering them around. However, among these wooden blocks of different file sizes, the only person who could not see the figure of the Bat Monster was not. Noticing this, Johnny Stone's expression became solemn, and he immediately clenched the Remington 870 shotgun in his hand and walked over there. But when he got closer, he he found that there was no trace of the bat monster there, and the whole church returned to silence at this moment, as if darkness enveloped the earth. Sensitively aware of the change in the atmosphere, Johnny Stone silently raised his vigilance and looked around the surrounding environment again. This time, not to mention the ceiling, even the neatly arranged seats were not spared, but still no trace of the monster was found. Is this leaving? In this case, Johnny Stone couldn't help but mutter. And at this moment, the stained glass window behind him suddenly made a bang. The hideous bat monster actually broke through the window and pounced on Johnny Stone, who was caught off guard, in a nearly sneak attack. In this regard, although Johnny Stone pointed the gun at his back at a very fast speed, his reaction was still half a beat slow. Hiss. Accompanied by the sound of claws tearing. The Remington 870 shotgun instantly turned into scrap metal and scattered around. As for Johnny Stone, he was also thrown out by this claw and directly knocked down the decorations with a row of wax lamps hanging next to him. The next second, the wax oil that fell on the ground spread everywhere, not only igniting the white curtains that were more than 10 meters high next to the stained glass window, but also spreading to every corner around. The cross in the church, the neatly arranged seats, and the carpet embroidered with the Catholic emblem were all ignited. The fire that was enough to burn everything instantly spread throughout the church, rendering it a layer of red. In this situation, the bat monster ignored the surrounding flames and turned to look at Johnny Stone, who had just been thrown out by him. "Lindo warrior, this is the second time we meet. This time, I will suck all your blood dry in this burning church." After saying that, the powerful demon spread his wings and dispersed the flames surrounding himself, and then took steps towards Johnny Stone step by step. Seeing that the sturdy figure of Batman was about to reach Johnny Stone, an unexpected sound suddenly exploded. Boom. Bang. Amid the roar of the motorcycle engine, the closed door of the church was slammed open, and a white motorcycle with headlights on sped down the aisle of the church, heading towards the location of Batman Chiangmo. Another dazzling light. Being illuminated by the headlights of the white motorcycle, Chiangmo subconsciously uttered a low curse, and then raised his hands to block his face from the light. Taking advantage of the moment, Red rolled down from the white motorcycle sideways, leaving only the white motorcycle to hit Batman under the push of inertia, but he dodged it with a nimble flip jump, and directly crashed into the blazing fire, causing a violent explosion. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe and support our channel.